All right, my watch says it's 5:02, so I'll call this meeting to order, the Bennington Board of Education, for our special meeting tonight to discuss the superintendent search firms. We're going to begin the meeting this evening with our public forum, so if there's anybody in the audience that doesn't have one of these orange sheets that would like to speak to the board, please grab one from the back table. Our meetings are governed by the Nebraska Open Meetings Act. The rules are on the back south wall here. If anyone has any questions on that. Looks like we have about 4 people that would like to speak this evening. So, and when you come up, would you please sit at the table here and speak into the microphone so the folks that are watching remotely can hear you? And just state your name and your address so we know you're a Bennington resident. And then we're going to have everybody, 5 minutes is the time limit. So you can try to keep your comments to 5 minutes. We have 4 people talking this evening, so just try to manage our time for the business at hand. And I think that's it. So we will start with Nicole Harris.
Oh, I had to go first.
You have number 1 on your papers. Oh, you should have short
Okay, all right, so my apologies if I sound nervous or break out in a rash because I haven't done this for, 25 years. Can everyone hear me okay? Okay. Let's see here. Okay, so good evening. My name is Nicole Harris. My address is 11770 North 175th Circle. I am a resident of the Bennington community and I reside in Newport Landing subdivision. My children attend Bennington Middle School North and Bennington Elementary School. I first want to extend my appreciation to each of you for volunteering to serve as our board members and for providing governance and oversight of our children's education, which represent our community's values, views, and shared desires as our district continues to grow. I'm taking the opportunity to speak with you this evening in an effort to elevate the conversation and the need for an additional assistant coach on payroll for the girls' high school wrestling team, which was formed in 2021. And it has grown to 7 rostered varsity girls at the high school and 8 new girls joining the middle school team this year. According to the Nebraska School Activities Association, a wrestler should be coached and supervised at all times, stressing proper technique and discipline to avoid injury. It goes without saying, but every now and then we need to remind ourselves that a well-structured strengthening program conducted under proper supervision can help prevent injury and enhance an athlete's performance. Taking into consideration that advertising, interviewing, selecting, and approving contracts is not something that can happen overnight, albeit the public, we want things now. But I am asking for this board to spend part of the next 24 days looking into and familiarizing yourself with the staffing crisis that our girls' athletics department is facing within the wrestling program. During the February 13th board meeting, I plan to address this board and this subject again, but with more details on the tournament safety liabilities and the lack of technical, tactical, and physical development that our girls' wrestling team is undergoing due to the coaching staff shortage. I implore you to familiarize yourself with the program, with the current coaching administration, and with the team before the next board meeting, so that you are prepared to act on the hiring request sooner than later. Thank you for your attention, for your time, and for your service to our Badger community.
Thank you. One question, who is the coach of the girls' team?
Alan?
Yes.
Okay.
It's
Okay.
Correct.
Thank you.
Thank you, Nicole.
Thank you.
Nicole, would you mind sharing a copy of your testimony this evening for the board? You can send it in at a later date, just so we have the reference, if you don't mind. Thank you. All right, the next person up for public forum is Carol Dussel-Cerny.
evening.
Oops.
First, I want to say thank you for getting out on the agenda the presentations. That's really helpful. If I could beg, I just saw them this afternoon, so a little bit earlier would be helpful if you're actually going to look at it and give it any thought. But it's a huge step in the right direction, so I appreciate that. Send off right away just questions that I had. My background, I'll be honest, is in HR and accounting, so when you're hiring somebody, it's like, okay, there's lots of questions to ask. I haven't heard answers, but maybe they're out there and I just haven't heard them, so if you know them. First of all, I think there's some, I don't know who made the decision to search firm, and I'm not saying we shouldn't, but I don't know if any consideration has been given to doing it internally. Like I said, I only had a quick chance to glance at the presentations, and all the advertising the school district is going to pay for anyway. So other than maybe on like the Teach Nebraska website or the firm's own personal website. So if you're paying for all of it anyway, you know, that's just one thing to consider. What culture do you want in your new superintendent? What culture do we want to create? What is our cost going to be? What qualifications do you want? What is the timeline? Is the timeline the only thing that matters? If you don't find that perfect one, are you going to extend the timeline, or is that just going to be a given? Who's making the decisions? Who's reviewing the proposals? I heard a lot of those things mentioned at the last meeting, but then I didn't hear any discussion. So again, if maybe all that stuff is happening, I would just be curious as to what it is. That, like I said, culture is important, cost is important, time is important, and just letting us, I'd like to know. One of the presentations mentioned public input and forum, so if you are taking input from the public, I would love to be considered for that position. Thank you. Oh, last question, will a decision be made tonight, or is it something that you will review?
For the search firm?
Yeah, if we're going to do a search firm, and which one?
I believe we are discussing that, correct?
There could be a motion this evening.
Okay.
It's on the agenda.
Okay.
So if there's a motion, there will be action. If there's not a motion, there will be.
Okay.
So it
Thank
depends
you,
on
I was
what
just
you do.
curious.
Yep.
Thank you.
All right, the next person up is Mary, is it Soka? Soka. Would you please come forward?
I did make a copy for everybody, so.
Thank you, that's helpful for us.
In case I talk too fast, or you like what I say so much, you want to use it for future reference. I'll put one there with Christie too.
I've been told before that I couldn't add something to the board,
You never know.
so I'm just asking.
So.
I'm fine if you want to give us your testimony, it's helpful for us to have the
I
notes.
have scratch notes.
For the future, or if you want to send them to us after.
Actually, also mine's in the email that I sent you, but I've been told before that I could give anything to the board that I was gonna say, because if I didn't get it approved by the district office at least 2 or 3 days ahead of time. So just so you know.
Okay.
If you have handouts for the board, they're supposed to be at the superintendent's office the Wednesday before the meeting.
Okay.
But if it is what you're reading, you can hand them
Okay.
what you're reading.
Thank you for the clarification.
Hi, my name is Mary Soka. I live at 13919 North 132nd Street. I'm speaking as a taxpayer in the Bennington School District for over 40 years and the grandmother of a student at Bennington Elementary. And I'm here to offer some qualifications and criteria for the board to consider when selecting a new president. Number one, the new superintendent would ideally be from the Midwest area and have values similar to the people in the Bennington community. When Grand Island and Omaha Public Schools hired someone outside the area, problems occurred. The community wants a superintendent who will put an emphasis on the core subjects and not bring in a political agenda. Number two, the new superintendent should have good communication skills and be willing to listen with an open mind and be responsive to suggestions and complaints from parents in the community. Number three, he or she must be fiscally conservative and responsible in spending our taxpayer dollars. For example, the defeat of the most recent bond issue with almost 70% of voters against it shows the community does not want additional spending until we can pay down our current high level of debt. Number four, the new superintendent should be willing to seek and accept financial guidance and advice from other professionals. For example, a qualified school financial expert who works with bond structuring, school debt, and other financial issues. We need a problem solver who can deal with the growth of the district as well as other concerns, someone who will work with the school board, teachers, and the community, and look at realistic alternatives for dealing with our current situation of possible future overcrowding. And thank you to all of you for serving, and thank you for listening.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, thanks, Mary.
Good job.
All right, next person up is Tracy Baker. I'm sorry. Take your time. Oh, great.
I'll just first add, like Carol said, these are just some last minute words thrown together, obviously knowing that the proposals were put out there just today. So it was a lot of information to take in, and I don't envy any of you for trying to make this decision. But let me thank you for adding the proposals to the meeting agenda and allowing for public comments today. That was huge and much appreciated. Before I speak to the firms, let me just be honest to say that I would believe most of you already know that many feel, and this is just hearsay and whatever, but that the next superintendent has been earmarked already and would be an internal hire. That being said, again, with the bond being voted down and many demanding better fiscal responsibility, it would be disappointing to spend thousands of dollars for a search firm to only to hire internally. So I hope the board is honest in the fact that if you have a replacement in mind already, please also be fiscally responsible and speak up now. As stated before on Monday, should we use a firm, again, we'd like to just reiterate to keep it local so that we hopefully find a replacement that embodies Nebraska's values. In reviewing the 4 proposals that were on the website today, and in turn looking at each of the firm's websites, my recommendation would be NASB. In reviewing the recent superintendent hires, as well as their in-depth proposal that included detailed descriptions on how they would engage with stakeholders, I feel they would be the most beneficial hire. And along with Carol's comments, should you guys decide to do stakeholder engagement, I too would be interested in helping out with that if possible. In reviewing the websites for GR Recruiting and McPherson and Jacobson, I'm concerned with their use of buzzwords like equity and equitable. I would prefer to see terms like education. I would place the term equity to be equal to that of the terms of diversity and inclusion. Any hire should solely be based on one's ability to fulfill the job duties required. I recently read a quote as follows: when a public institution says it's pursuing diversity, it means that it may never again accomplish anything useful. Behind the euphemisms, diversity means we may be putting in unqualified people and pretending they add value. Diversity is a tax to subsidize incompetence. So please consider these words as you make your choice. And again, thanks for what you're doing today. It's a tough decision. I wouldn't want to be in your place. Thanks.
Thank you, Tracy.
Thanks, Tracy.
Tracy?
Yeah.
And the next person we have is Kathy. I'm gonna find this pronunciation. Tausche?
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. Would you come forward and provide us with your comments?
Hey, Kathy Fauché, 7948 North 152nd Avenue in Bennington. Just here today to give my thoughts on the selection process for a search firm. I would endorse the Nebraska Association of School Boards. They seem to be just close to home and work with a lot of, obviously, Nebraska school districts. And in speaking with some of my contacts, some other school board members I've spoken to in other districts, they've been happy with that search firm. So that is my thoughts on that. And also, if possible, if you could explain kind of the process at the meeting or in a future meeting of involving parents in the search process and how that will go. Thank you.
Thank you, Kathy.
Thank you. Thanks.
Thank you, Kathy. Is there anybody else that I missed that would like to provide comments tonight? It's a small group, so I hope you got it. All right. Thank you, Jody. All right, the next item on the agenda is for us to discuss and consider the presentations from the superintendent search firms. And I wanted to just provide a little bit of background on kind of how we got to this board. I know there's been some feedback from the community wanting a little bit of additional information in that regard. So when Dr. Hawk announced his resignation late last year, the executive committee of the prior board met and discussed kind of next steps. There's a window of time where superintendents are generally in the pool looking to be available for the next school year. And so that time is generally now. Knowing we had 3 additional new board members joining, we decided that it would probably make the most sense to not make any decisions at all until the new board was installed, and that's what we did. The search firms that were selected, it's a small but mighty group, it's kind of a niche service area. What we asked Dr. Hawk to do was to contact the other districts in the metro area in Nebraska that have utilized search firms to make sure that we have a broad variety of folks to consider. So it is our intention to, we call the Millard, we call OPS, North Platte, the gamut of folks, Ralston. So we make sure to include all of those who have recently gone through this process, hoping to learn from their, what happened in their search process. So that is how we came up with the 6. We try to get local, Midwest, Nebraska, as well as national, so that the board could evaluate and decide what we wanted to do. So the executive committee, so Steve and Jeremy and I met this week and narrowed that decision down from 6 individuals to 4. And Jeremy and Steve, please jump in if I misspeak or you want to add anything. But cost was the primary differentiator between the 6 down to the 4. So it was pretty close between the 4, and we decided it was probably an important enough decision for the whole board to weigh in. So that is our intention this evening, for everybody to have an opportunity to provide feedback. We all received these proposals at our very first meeting, so we've had them for several weeks now, so we've had ample time to look at them and evaluate who we think is going to be the best search firm for the district. So tonight, what we're looking to do is provide 30 minutes for each search firm to give us information. We've asked them not to simply recite what they've already provided to us, but to kind of tell us what the value add that they will provide. And we're starting from scratch. This is the beginning. They're going to first ask us what we want in a superintendent, and they're going to get community information on that as well. So we have not moved forward at all, other than trying to pick a consultant to assist with us in going forward. So Steve and Jeremy, did I miss anything with respect to what we discussed you'd like to share tonight?
No, I think you covered everything.
Okay, all right. So Dr. Hawk, if I could have you kind of introduce the folks so that the board understands who we're speaking with. The first up is Ed Wise.
Yes.
I don't
My
think-
apologies, I don't have a microphone,
Okay.
but Ed Wise and Paul will go through the presentation.
All right, thank you, Paul. Just make sure you speak into the microphone so that the folks that are viewing can hear everything. And then I'm hopeful that we'll have time after your presentation for the board to ask questions.
Absolutely.
Okay, and then I think for the board's information, I think my thought was we'll wait till everybody's done presenting and then we have an agenda item for discussion.
Hey, my name is Dr. Paul Tedesco, and I'm a semi-retired superintendent. It's awful hard when you're doing a job, and many of you are too young to understand that yet, but it's going to happen. It's when you put your heart and soul in things for many, many years, and you just can't walk away and do nothing. And we have that passion still. Our team members all have the passion to do good for education with the students, and especially in the area of leadership. And that's one of the things we believe sets us apart, is the fact that we have over 250 years of administrative experience in our membership. And one person that would be working with me directly, everybody would have something to do maybe behind the scenes, but with you, would be Bill Molenko from Nebraska. I started my career in Nebraska and ended my career in Nebraska. And Bill spent all of his career in Nebraska, and he was 2012 Superintendent of the Year. Tonight, though, he said, when I got contacted, I got a hold of him, and he said, I'm going to be in David City with the grandkids wrestling meet. He said, I could get out of it, but then there'd be no parent or adult there for him if he got hurt or something. And I said, Bill, you go to that wrestling meet. So he's kind of filling in the place of his son, the dad. So otherwise, he'd gladly be here with you. Oops. And of course, as you've already mentioned, this is going to be the toughest thing you've done if you just got on the board. If you've been on before, it had been a while back before you did it, so I don't know if anybody's been on during the search. And it's one of the many tough jobs you have, along with policy making and budget decisions. So for EdWise, we talk about getting background information, and we get it from, like if you hired us tonight, And we would want to put a survey out and have people from all over the community, the school, the board, decide some things that I'm going to show you here. We can open up the desired characteristics. So this link would go out and you can see we want to know who it is, and there's a drop-down menu that would say student or whatever their background is, so we know who we're getting it from. And we ask them to select 5 out of 12 characteristics. These are researched, what you need or want in a school superintendent. And yeah, you want them all, but we're going to ask you to narrow it down to 5 to help us build that profile. And then the next group, we ask you to do 4 of 10 of the skills desired in the superintendent according to research. Always you want them all. And the next area we ask is for 5 out of 16 thinking, feeling, behaving. So it's like work styles. What do they like in the work setting that you would like to see? And if we go on down, we also ask everybody for what are the concerns or issues in the school district? And you may all know them, and you may not hear from some of them. But at the same time, what's also unique about the school? I could name a few, and you have many more. And then what advice would you give the superintendent? We go back to the, there we go. So when you get this information, oh, I'm sorry. Whoops. Okay, the initial meeting, let's open that up. So it'll take about a week for that survey. And then this is a different school, but just showing you things that you go through the initial meeting with us. We would scroll up some more there so you can see the characteristics. And this is what the board, the staff, and the parent community and the students said. That was very important. And what I want to show you about this one is, so why not just do the board? We want everybody's input. And here's an example, strong fiscal responsibility management. Yes, that board wanted that. But when it came to, and there was more people than 24 for the parent community, but that's how many picked that item. And so they added that in as something they wanted us to look for in the next superintendent, because one group had it very high on their list, and then if you go up some more to skills, you can see the same thing kind of happened there. Educational leader who engages families and community in a meaningful way. The board added that. And so what it does for us, and I think there's one more, work styles. What it does for us, I say, because we'd be working with you, what it does for the board is, so you have your view, what's everybody else's, and you represent them. Do you have to change everything they have? No, but you can add in something and build that profile that we put out on advertising. And if you go down some more there, oops, on that same thing, we would go through a contract, and it's nothing that we could finalize. You'd have to work with your attorney, but as you grow as a school district, I imagine you're going to have to start looking, instead of 10 up, 10 down for a salary to put out there and try to attract somebody. You're going to want to kind of look more to the upside, because your enrollment is jumping all the time. If you did 10 up and 10 down where you're at, you're going to be way past the 10 down, probably by next year, let alone 2 years out. And there may be other things in those contracts, whether it's annuity, in the larger schools, or it's an incentive to live in the district, things like that we can work with you on, and your attorney. And then focus groups. Who do you want to involve in the actual interviews? We have suggestions for you there, but we would have you fill that out here on this initial meeting and talk about it. And believe me, everybody you put in there, whether it's 50 people, 60 people, they don't all, are not all able to reserve that time that you set. And we need them there every day of the interviews. And we do an orientation meeting with them and with the board. So we'd be back for the initial meeting after the survey, come back for an orientation day with everybody that would kind of follow the schedule of the interviews. So we might meet with students during the daytime, administration, administrator's office, things like that might happen in the daytime, but parent community would be at night. And if we could go down a little further there, the focus group, we have that. Okay, the nomination spreadsheet, not going to get into that. And the proposed schedule, I think we would have all that to look at the initial meeting. Okay, go back to the slides. Okay, advertising, I think was mentioned. The advertising is Teach Nebraska. is gonna be very good to utilize for you. You get that flavor of people who are interested here. Again, I think you're gonna want experience, but that's just, something we'd have to work with you about and get that quality and characteristics you want. At the same time, we put it on the district website, social media, our website, social media, and then that, web page, AASA, school superintendents look at. You can get 30 days out on that, and it's about, I have in the proposal $600 to $900, it's like $770 or something like that. But anyway, that would be one way. And then you see all the people talking to each other. We have over 2,000 people registered with us. So when we do a search, we don't get 2,000 applicants. But we get the word out to 2,000 people that have told us they're interested in knowing about openings. And then also we call people. You may not be registered with us, and we know that you have those qualities. We'll call and ask you if you thought about it, if you're interested. Make those connections, talk to colleges, and things of that nature to try to attract more candidates. Screening the candidates to look in their background, once they have got everything turned in, and all the information is there, so we know they're in. Somebody turns in a cover letter and a resume but doesn't sign the application, doesn't turn in their transcripts and things, they really aren't coming after the job. We don't do background checks, or reference checks, I should say, on them. And the reference checks, we take the people they mentioned, we ask them for 4 names and up to 4 reference letters, and they can't be the same. So we want to shout at least 8 people. And beyond that, they have agreed by signing the application form that we are able to contact others with knowledge of them. So Jim was one of the candidates, and he had Jeremy and Allison in as references, but Steve and Christy were not. We could look on the website where that person's been and send that information out, or call one of those individuals. So we'll make calls, and we'll make email Google forms where we ask them to fill it out and provide the information confidentially. That is the same information we would get on the phone, same questions. So it's consistent, and we fill out, and then we have a 1-page summary. We later would bring that with us. And once all the applicants are in and that screening is done, here's a decision point here. If you read the application, and I think you did, you can do a test to find out some more information, other data point. We have a lot of data points, that survey, and all their information in their application and our reference page. And you can find out if they are, usually out of this survey here, this information assessment here, you're high in 2 of the 4 categories. Usually you're not high in 4. I mean, if I took it, you took it, it's usually 2 of them are kind of high. And if you're dominance and influence, you're probably fast-paced, action-packed, bold, and you're a go-getter, and it might push some people over the edge that are conscientious and steadiness. They want to be a little more steady on the job, not as quick to do things, but very logical and methodical and things like that. I won't go through the whole cycle of things there, but that's something you can do for $100 a person, and we recommend only doing your finalists, whether that's 3 people you're going to bring in to interview at the focus groups, or whether that's 2, or whether that's 4, something of that nature would be only on the finalist. And that's an option. You don't have to do that, because some of our questions on our reference, we ask these questions, rate them 1 to 5, and we have those categories there. So there's a dominant question, and there's an influence, and a conscientiousness, and a steadiness. So we get a picture of that. We don't get all 5s back on anybody. And they're honest about things. And then the completed applications, we find a way to work with your tech department to have those be confidentially that only the board can access, so you can read ahead of time. And I mean ahead of time before we come in with our recommendations. We can discuss what you read. We can give you our recommendations, and has every board we work with taken our recommendations, say, yeah, those are the 4, those are the 3. No, there's been some people that looked at that and said, well, what about Steve? Well, yeah, he was close in our minds, so let's do 2 of them, and let's add Steve and throw one of your recommendations out. That's an option for you. We're not here to demand you do those things we're here to help you and guide you and collaborate with you. If you want to click on the reference summary, it's just and again, just some of the information at the top there you would find, on their pages of information they provide us. But then down below would be, we've got a hold of people and talk to them. One of the questions we asked, you can see back up of the 7 individuals, phone and email, and how they rank their excitement about this person coming to be their superintendent. So that's something that you would find in the information. And down below the top 5 or 6, we won't scroll up, you can scroll down. But remember, we asked you to do 5 out of 12, 4 out of 10. We put that information back in front of you, always, here it is. So as you're looking through that person's information they submitted, here's just another reminder of what you were looking for. Okay, so it's not that we think you're gonna forget it all, but we're all live a busy life. And so it's there to help you in that summary. Selection of candidates, so once we get to that part and you're selecting who you want to interview, we make the phone calls, and we already had that initial meeting, lined up the interview dates and times, and so we give them a schedule. We ask them if there's something else they need in regard to a spouse or guest coming with them. And we would line up individuals working with the school on somebody to tour the buildings, tour the area a little bit, as well as interview with the different groups. That part, it's like we've done it separately, so the students have time with the candidate, the certified staff have time, the support staff, and so it's a long day, because the board's always last at night, but guess what? The job is not always a short day. Anytime I work as a superintendent, it's a long day, it's hard, it's stressful, and that's what that day is gonna be too. And so if some people get excited about, well, the poor person, that's their job, and they're trying to get this job. Back when we met at orientation meeting with the focus group members, we would have them, as you would do too, submit your suggested questions. We have a whole bank of questions if you want us just to give it to you. We believe in getting the questions from the individuals here and working with those groups. So on-site and then off-site, we'd be emailing and saying, okay, here's your list, 60 of them, and however many members are in that committee. Your name's at the top of one of these columns, you use 10 X's and go in that row next to the question you really want, and we feather it down. And then even when we think we're done, we ask, is there anything we still think we're missing? And usually it's like an hour time frame. The board's a little longer because we believe they should make a presentation. And it's not so much that they present what they're presenting to you, you're not grading, you're looking for how they, well, like I'm kind of doing, are they looking around at you? Are they always having to read the notes? Can they present and carry themselves well? Versus I can look at you and answer questions real well too. So it's another data point, in other words, there. And if we, so the day of the interviews, we would be here early that day, make sure we bring paper copies of the questions with a box down below that says 1 through 5. You don't have to do it, but we put information there so you can rank that answer and fill in a few key words, because you're not going to get the whole quote. Because when the interview is done, we send everybody on that committee, whether it's students, board, teachers, whoever, parents, community, a Google form that says, before you interview the next person, you fill this out, overall impression. So you can write what you want. Strengths of this candidate. Concerns or issues, write that down. And then there's 2 other data points that are like a math number. There's an answer, in other words. One of them is a drop-down menu says, excellent choice to be our superintendent, acceptable choice, acceptable with reservation, or not a good fit. And then the last one is 1 through 10. 1, I'm not excited at all that person would be my next superintendent. 10, I'm very excited. So when you get all done with the interviews, we would facilitate with you a time where you go through all of their information before you decide and make any choices. That's getting their voices heard for you. So now back up to those interviews. We've also had a time where the district wanted to shorten the day, or they just wanted people to be mixed. We've done that too. So whether it's students, parents, teachers, like in 2 or 3 different groups, because there's so many, that they could be mixed also. And sometimes in schools of larger size here, you could have a time where they're, during that day, in a building or a couple of buildings, answering a few questions with only a few people asking questions, but all the staff or community members that want to sit in and listen can be there. And there's just options to doing that. If you want to click on organize, please. And again, this is not supposed to make sense here. This is you can do 3 in one day pretty much. But if you look down further to the board part, you're going to have to be here, 4:25. Community people 3:20. That's the tough part. If you do 2 people, you get closer to maybe for the community people on the board. For the board 5:35, you might be off work. For the community people 4:30, maybe. So you're asking that commitment out of them. So there's ways to do it. And again, if you have 4, I would definitely go 2 days. There's something to think about there. And I think this is kind of, when the interviews are done, we're the ones that, so like myself coming here tonight, if I was interviewing for the superintendent's job and I didn't get it, my firm would call me, call the individual in other words, and say, thanks for your time and effort, the board has selected somebody else, and we never give definition to that. Somebody always says, oh, can you give me a clue what else, No, because we're educators and we're good people like you are, and we want to make people feel better, and we're gonna say things that aren't really true to make them feel better. That it was so close, and your answers are really good, and yeah, could be, but we just let them know. So if they're interviewed, they get a call. It could be the one they want to have, or it could be the one that says they offered to somebody else. If you didn't get interviewed, you get an email back, a communication like it used to be, a letter way back when I first started, and it got to be emails along the way. I love the technology, I'll tell you, but we take care of that for you. We also, on this part here, we believe in making the phone call for you. If you want to be in the room, if you want to make it yourself, that's a choice you can do. So why do we believe in making the call for you? You've told me a salary. They already knew a range. Before they came for the interview, before you selected them, by the way, we would send out to them, are you still interested? Email, right back, yes. Number 2 question, here's the contract terms, conditions. Are you in favor of those? Yes or no? And if it's a no, what do you think you really want in there? And the salary range or the number you give. And are you agreeable to that number? And if not, tell me why you think you deserve something different. So you would know that. You say, I want to take Paul, and we would say, yeah, but Paul wants this. You can still interview him. You don't have to give them what's on their paper, but anyway, why do we say we make the call? You're trying to establish a great working relationship with the new superintendent. And sometimes, not always, sometimes the call goes like, yeah, I'm still, what? I want 5,000 more. Well, the board's offering this. Oh, geez. Do you really want to start a relationship knowing that's how the call went? Or do you want me to come back and say, he'd like some more, here's the number. And sometimes I've had the conversation where we've already had that conversation with the board and we say, there isn't going to be any more. And so thanks for applying, and they'll go on to the next person. Well, can you just check and call me back? I said, I'll do that. I already know the answer. Go to the board. They're already looking at the next person in line because we've been through 1, 2, whatever. And they said, yeah, go back, call him back and tell him that was it. I get him on the phone and I say, like I told you, the board is sticking to their numbers. So thanks. And he says, I'll take it. I go, what? So again, did you want to know all of that, or did you want to know this person wants to be here and you have a good relationship? That's where we're after, making sure that's a good relationship for a start. But it doesn't preclude if you want to be there, listen to it, or even make it yourself. Here's the suggested timeline. It's usually 8 to 9 weeks. And again, you can see next week is skipped because that would be the week to do the survey. And then the week of the January 30th would be to come in and look at the results and the characteristics. And then start advertising as soon as, you see at the top it says the week of January 30th. So we met the 30th, if we make the 31st, we meet the 2nd of February, whatever that date was. But again, that's why there's a gap week there. Let's get that survey of information, get the input back from everybody and get it summarized and given to you. And some of that summary is information you could use in the future as you set goals and things with the new superintendent, because you can look at the concerns, the issues, or there may be other things that you decide are going to be more important at that time. We have our own application. I don't know how I'm doing for time, so I'm not going to worry about showing you that. And that's the one thing about having a search firm. Most candidates want to be confidential until it's not. So once you select them for an open, for the finalist interview, now their name's out there, okay? Having a search firm, people can ask, and I hear a lot of, concern and things, which is great. People can ask you, but they're not your candidates until we turn them over to you and you're looking. And so when you screen down and say, these are the 4, the other names never go public, it's just those 4, and that's by law. So it's not something a search firm does for you, it's the law part. Whoever you select for an interview is public. So again, you can see a gap, final date to receive applications, and there's a gap to the board reviews applications, the 13th. That's so we can make sure we get the references done. Because some people come right away and apply, and some people wait till the 22nd, 23rd, 24th, and we need a little more time to get that done versus, well, they turned in the 24th, we're meeting the board tomorrow night, not gonna work, so we give ourselves a couple weeks there. And I'm not gonna click on this one. In your packet of information stuff in the back side would be a list of other services and things that we offer, so rather than have that be something we could go through. And then I think somewhere towards the back on the fee part, and again, it's a board decision, it's not a have to, it's not like a requirement. The board can decide to pay somebody mileage to drive for an interview. You can decide to get them a hotel room if they're from a far away. You can decide to fly them in. You can decide those are all their expenses. I mean, that's just to let you know that those things would be yours to do. And that's not unusual, but at the same time, how it gets handled varies at times from board to board. So I hope I left you some time for some questions here. I do want to thank you for the opportunity to present tonight too.
Thank you, Paul. It looks like we've got about 5 minutes or so for questions. I'm willing to extend that a few minutes if we have folks that want our questions to be answered. So I'll open to the board for questions. Just a reminder, we're streaming public, so every question we ask will be recorded and whatnot, so make sure we're constructive in our discussion. So
I guess if you don't mind me starting, Paul.
Sure.
I don't think that's on, so it's kind of quiet.
Okay, if you don't mind me starting, I guess I'm just asking, of how many years have you been doing this? Can I ask you that?
I out of full-time employment, I stopped in June of 17.
Okay.
And I wanted to do this and hadn't really got anything put together. And in the spring of 18, by myself, a neighboring school got a hold of me and said, "We know you want to do this. Why don't you come do our superintendent search?" And I said, "Oh, I can sure do that." And it spurred me on. And so from there, I went and had some more people join and do that. So 5 years. And by the way, that person is still there and going to go on to the 6th year. So, I mean, and that guarantee at the back of 1 year, we have nobody that has, the smallest time frame has been 3 years. So if you want to make it a 2-year guarantee, we're in.
Could you tell me of your experiences in all the schools that you have helped with this, how far away have the candidates been picked from? Is it usually close by? Is it usually far away? Can you give me a rough estimate?
It's usually within the state or neighboring state. This current one we're doing, and I think it's partly due to hard conditions to get people to apply since, and I'm gonna not say it's blamed on COVID, but they got used to being close to home or in home. And so the number of applicants has been decreased a little bit. And so we did have some from Florida, one from Florida, one from New Orleans, and one from Nevada. And we had others from other states, but they only put a resume in and a letter. Besides, and it happens to be in Iowa right now, that search, and besides people in Iowa there.
Thank you.
Yeah, and then, go ahead.
So Allison alluded to earlier kind of the timeline that there's a window in which superintendents are looking for other opportunities. Based on where we are right now, and you gave your timeline for the search, is that your typical timeline? Did you make that more concise or shorten it based on, where we are at this time of year?
This is our typical timeline. And we've had some searches that have been opened up late February, middle of March type things, and we have completed them in 6 weeks. It's not, for the people involved, and we pride ourselves on getting enough people to be in those committees along with the board that, by doing that, you've generated some people that are gonna be supporters for your new person. They've met the person, they've listened to him or her, and things are just, go better. So, the further we get, I would say, into anything opens up in March, you better hustle. And we shorten down the application time period. That'd be one way, and that's what happens in the 6 weeks. Instead of a month, it's like 2.5 weeks. Instead of 2 weeks for us with a complete reference, it's probably a week and a half. And that's how we get to 6. But right now, you do not need to do that.
Thank you.
Steve?
Yeah, and then the question that I had for you, Paul, was back and just make sure I'm clear on the interview processes, right? And so we do have some people, both in the public and I think the school district would like to be involved in those as well. And I understand you said that that's possible, right?
Absolutely, yes.
And then, so kind of walk me through real quick, and maybe I missed it, but I'm assuming, so we have that bank of questions, put those out, what you showed the slide, and then they just rank those questions, and we take the top, 20 questions, or what did you say it was?
Well, for normally it's 50 minutes interview, we call it an hour.
Yep.
But that gives the people interviewing 5 to 10 minutes to fill out the interview rating form I talked about, and maybe another 10 minutes for them to take care of necessities before the next interview starts. And the thing is, that's probably enough time for, 12 to 14 questions. And I'm not counting the one which we normally have every time is, tell us about yourself. You got the resume and all that, but try to get them to come in and sit down and relax. This is something I know about, I can tell you, and then you hit me with the hard questions, but you get them in there. So that's 12 to 14 plus tell us about yourself. And you always give them a chance to ask questions of the group.
Right, so that was kind of my question. So there may be duplicative questions for each group.
Yeah, and we try, and when you say that bank of questions, we don't bring the bank in unless a group just is struggling to find, a question. We reword some, some people just say, I slapped that in there, well, here, same thing, we'll add a sentence structure to it, and they agree that that's what they want, But, so you can have our bank of questions right away and pick from it. But we believe that you put some thought into profile, and you can develop questions based on that. You can develop questions based on the concerns, the issues going on in the school, better than somebody from the outside could do. We can help organize it. And when you talk about questions the same, we try to eliminate that. And even if they are similar, the certified staff question might be similar to one that the administration has, but the administrations might be leaning more towards, how are you going to handle this? And the certified wants to know if this is going to be something you would allow, which is kind of asking the same, but it's not always the same. I'm going to tell you that.
Okay. So then how does the public part of it work? So we would have individual people from the public come in and ask the questions? That's what I'm kind of.
Okay, and on that initial meeting thing, we scrolled down through, there was a nomination sheet.
Yep.
That's where we'd ask the board members to nominate in there, and whether it's, the number could be 60, 70, however many people. And we have across the top, we have, so you put the name in the left column, and across the top, we kind of have categories for you to kind of watch for. They have a child in school, put an X in there so we know you're kind of covering and you would know you're covering your bases. They have somebody in preschool, they have somebody in high school, in middle school, things of that nature. Somebody owns a business, somebody's a, former board member, somebody's a former teacher. Doesn't mean they're in, but you kind of can, once we have that whole list, we come back to you. So it's like a homework for you, a survey next week, and then the nomination sheet. And then we come back and say, no, we're gonna make the calls for you. Who do you want us to call first? We got too many people, or, and as I mentioned before, you could use an auditorium, or we can have anybody that wants to be in there, but only so many people are gonna be asking the questions, and everybody else is listening. They can all do the interview rating form. So there's ways to do that. And by the way, like I said before, you call somebody and you tell them they've got to do these 2 days. Can't miss. You can't say, I'll do those 2 individuals, but the next day I can't be there. That's not fair to the next 2 people. And depending on how you rated them, it's not fair to the 2 you just had. If you rated them down, maybe or something.
So then you're getting those questions though ahead of time. They will submit their questions with that submission, correct? Like what they're gonna ask specifically.
And they're on a Google form, so they end up being on a spreadsheet. And so here's, first tab is all of them. And we put your names across the top and we tell you how many X's you can use. Now, do I count if you only put 9? I said you could use 10. No, we don't do that. People are pretty honest. But at the same time, then the next tab over would say, here's the top 10 or 15 questions. If you're agreeing with all these, they're in. If your top 10 votes ended up with about 20 questions, all with the same 4 or 5, 6, whatever the number of people that was the high score, then you'd have to tailor it down and say, we're gonna vote again. We email it back out, make another tab, and now you only get 10 out of these 20. We try to narrow it down, and then once we get down to the number we want, like I said, we ask. Now that you see them, you can look back at the other tabs. Is there one question that you just think you have to have? And if we're not too long in questions, we can add it, and we ask the group for consensus. It's a lot of, that's back and forth email, but at the same time, it works really well. And the groups, those questions we put into a Word doc, like I say, and there'll be under each question will be a square that they can write something in that will help them when they're filling out their interview rating form.
But those are coming from your bank or some, like, they're not willy-nilly questions that we're asking, right? What are those questions that they're?
They're just like you guys and the students, everybody. When we have an orientation meeting, they'll all be submitting their suggested questions.
To that, and then we send that out to be ranked.
Yes.
Okay.
And we send
That's
like
what I
your
was-
questions to you, parent questions to them,
Correct.
so they don't,
So we
otherwise we're getting different mixes there.
Exactly. So somebody's gonna review them and make sure that they meet the criteria that we're. That was my question.
Thanks.
Christy, I know we're short on time, so
Sorry.
it's okay. We'll just try to keep this concise as we can. I want to give you a chance to ask
Just-
questions.
Describe if you've had the opportunity to work with a board with hiring a superintendent where there were in fact potential internal candidates. How do you protect the integrity of the process when that is the case?
And the answer is yes. And immediately, so that, again, I'll just use the board. If you were the administrators here, and when we come to meet with them, they can fill out the form on what, because that's that first week. And when we come in to meet with them, it's like, and we'll ask them ahead of time by email too, but are you thinking you're going to apply? If you are, you're out of the administration committee. Just cannot be a part of that process. It's not about, I don't want you to know all the questions, but you shouldn't be a part of trying to figure out who we want. And you're basically could skew it towards yourself. You should be out of that part. And like in-house people, it has not been the case every time that they get it either. You know, and it's usually once they go through the process and once your community goes through the process, you know, there have been times where people say, I don't understand, you know, how they do the questions. And once they get through it, it's like, oh, yeah, I like that. You know, and so the process itself, along the way, it's clearer and clearer to everybody, and they become more and more comfortable with it.
Yes? I have three really, if you could keep it really quick. I know I'm putting you on the spot. Okay, so the first is, I want to go back to the community input piece that you're going to spend a week doing. We obviously have connections with folks that have kids in school, but how do you reach those that do not have kids in school, that are still business folks and others that are interested in the community? We only have 1 week, and that worries me that we don't have enough time to get the data that we need. So help me with that question.
Yeah, because the student parent part, we go through your student information
Exactly,
system.
but the rest of the folks, I mean, we have really a big
Right.
district. We want to make sure we capture everybody's input.
We work with the school, this tech guy here, and we put a link out there, you know, and it's labeled what we're looking for and how long they have to do it. And it's on the school website, you know, and so could somebody from a neighboring town, school, whatever, get on it? Yes, they could. But normally in a week's time, they have their own things happening, just like you guys do. And so it hasn't been ever really a problem that we found. So that's how it gets out there.
Okay, and if folks are not techie, I'm sure there's a paper version, or there's some way to account for that, or not?
Well, we have not run into that issue.
Okay.
Because you can do it on your phone, your iPad, your computer,
Okay,
you know, and the link is not limited. You know, I mean, so you do it, you want to do it again, you can, you know, and, you know, so if we limit it to one, what happens then is just what you're talking about. So I don't know how to do that. And my friend comes over with his iPad, you know, computer, phone, whatever, and I'll do it with you. If he's already filled one out, well, it would preclude him from doing it if we had a limit of one, which you could do to it. So we leave it open.
okay. And can you verify for me how many existing searches you're currently doing? I just want to make sure with the staff you have, we obviously really want you to be focused on us
Yes.
if you're selected, and I want to make sure you have the time to do it, so.
Right now, we're finishing, well, January 31st and 1st would be interview days on the one we're currently doing.
Okay.
And I made a presentation to another board, and they're deciding tonight,
Okay,
no, sorry, they're deciding Monday night, the 23rd. So
so
at
it
this
goes
time,
to,
yeah, at this time, it would be one or two.
okay. And then the last one is probably the hardest question is what is one thing you wish boards knew at the beginning of the search process? It would make things easier.
What, that board's new,
Yes,
that burden on you transfers to the board, or to the search firm. And what I mean by that is it's, and I don't know your backgrounds as far as what you do daily, but most people have a job, have a family, have so many things going on. This is a job, and helping you with that job is what we do. You know, just like we tell applicants, you know, some of them say, well, I don't know if I have time. I'm sorry, you got a job, and if you're looking for a job, it's a second job. So, you know, I think you have to say, and again, I use that word trust. And I don't mean like there's something you shouldn't trust, but, you know, right now you're learning about the process. Let the process go, and as it goes along, and I could show you a video, but it's on our website from a board president in Woodbine, Iowa. And, you know, we did a superintendent search there a couple of years ago, followed by the community and the city joining the school to look for a recreation director of a new $3 million facility. And they called us and they said, well, we know you're all superintendents, you know, in your life. We like your leadership search and how you involve with the community and everybody, and they like the process. Could you come and do a rec director? We're like, okay, you know, I mean, we had to pause because it was like still finding a leader, and we went through, and then we got that one done, and they turned right around and says, hey, we need a STEM director, and followed that with they had a Building Blocks Academy, a preschool, childcare. They added on to that facility rec center, and they brought us back again. I was like, you know, you guys could be one, you know, heck of a client here. But it was because the process worked so well, the community did not believe in it because they were 2 years away from some other search firm had that superintendent was in there. And they found out during that time that that person was pushed out somewhere and given to them because it was late in the year type thing. So they said, well, you're gonna bring in another one of those firms, and so it was that distrust. But as it went on,
Great.
real comfort.
Thank you so much, Paul. I appreciate your time. I know we went over a little bit, but I appreciate
Thank
the
you.
information. It was helpful. Just last check, was there any last questions? All right, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Paul.
Hope to hear from you.
Thank you.
So don't mind shaking hands.
No,
Thank you.
good.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, I think the next candidate up for discussion this evening is GR Recruiting.
Yep, so the clicker's right there, everything's loaded, so as soon as you just hit the right arrow, left arrow for one button.
And if you don't mind, we're gonna have you sit at the table and use, I'll carry the mic either way. Just make sure we're talking to the microphone. We have folks that are watching from
Super.
electronic system.
I just had to check out technology because as a former superintendent, I was enabled my whole career.
And we're gonna give you guys 30 minutes tonight. We went over a little bit on our prior one, so we have a little bit of leeway, but we obviously want folks to have the time to get questions answered. So please allot enough time for us to ask questions at the
I will do
end.
that.
Okay, thank you.
Nice to meet you. Yes. Is Junior there?
Yes.
They played some junior basketball. Hello, honey. And Phyllis. Yep.
Welcome, thank you. We appreciate you being here on a Friday night. I know it's a difficult time, but we appreciate you being here and we're excited to learn more about your organization.
Good name, Ralph, and Dr. B. That we guarantee. It's just a minute to get set up, if you don't mind. And would it help to have a hard copy of our PowerPoint? Each one of them?
If you have it,
I think that's helpful sometimes, so.
yes. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Yes.
You can leave that there. I'll pick that for her.
And just make sure you guys are speaking into the mics. I know sometimes it's hard to hear, especially on the video, so.
And I've watched a couple of your board meetings, and so I do appreciate that.
Yes.
Most certainly. And you also all had an opportunity to receive and read our proposal, I assume. I appreciate that very much. So we have 15, 20 minutes for presentation, 15, 20 minutes, another 10 minutes for questions. Unless you have more questions, then you can extend the time or you're willing to extend the time.
Yes.
Wonderful, wonderful. So with that in mind, I, of course, in a moment, will introduce ourselves more totally, but I'm Dick Christie, and this is Lee Pluggy, who is one of our associates. We're with GR Recruiting. We're two of the three team members that would be assigned to this particular search. The other one is Mark Evans. Mark would not be on site, but would work remotely. Mark's the former superintendent at Omaha Public Schools. I'm the former superintendent of Constable Bluffs, so just a matter of background, but we'll get into that detail in a moment here. What I want you to know is that we're excited about the opportunity to present and to be able to share with you how we think we can help you in terms of your search for a new superintendent, your next superintendent. One thing I can tell you about us is that we're committed to collaborating with you in this particular process. We want to provide quality services. We want to develop trust, a personalized relationship. I think relationships are important. I think just as important as anything else, it's personalized services, communication, transparency, and positive working relationships are, I think, the standards for our organization, and I'm sure yours as well. So I think we'll get along famously in that regard. In terms of the PowerPoint presentation, that's the first. So our key, of course, is we believe experience is the key, and we'll be able to illustrate that in a moment. Okay. Like any good organization, we just share our mission statement. I know I've read your mission statement, and I think ours and your mission statement have things in common, and I want to point that out. I think mission statements certainly drive organizations. So the next frame. So our firm owner, Gary Ray, will be involved. I just want you to be aware of that. Next frame. So I, of course, am a prior UNO professor of education, and I also was the executive director of the Metropolitan Omaha Education Consortium. Your school district's a member of the Metropolitan Omaha Education Association. I've been in every one of your buildings in that particular assignment, and while during the school day, I understand how things occur in our school district. You have wonderful administrators, wonderful teachers, and I want to compliment you on that. You also have some buildings that I think are well designed. So in addition to that, I want you to be aware that this will be, I've done in excess of 130 of these searches, many of them in Nebraska and Iowa and in this particular region, and I'll share specifics with you when we get to that particular phrase, that particular piece. Lane, go ahead and introduce yourself.
Yeah, my name is Lane Pluggy, and I've not been in any of your schools, but I planted some of the trees out here in probably the late 60s or early 70s. My father and I were contract planters, so I grew up in Ralston. So spent 25 years in Nebraska schools as a teacher, a principal, and a superintendent. Then I left for the dark side. I crossed into Iowa, and I spent 19 years there in Iowa City, and then I had my career at Green Hills AEA, which is the former Lus Hills AEA. It's similar to ESU's.
So, and then the third member of the big course, Mark Evans. Mark was the former Omaha Public School Superintendent, and the reason why I asked him to be a part of it is he was, before I went to OPS, he was the superintendent of Andover Public Schools in the Wichita, Kansas area, which would be a carbon copy of your school district in terms of the kind of district it is and the kind of growth it's experiencing on the edge of the metropolitan area. So in terms of experience, we of course are an organization that is committed to supporting and placing candidates the very best match. We want fit. Fit being the connection between the district and the candidate. The right fit is what makes things work. We're of course professional consultants. Go ahead. We have associates in Nebraska and the Midwest, and we have national experience and connections as well. We have Nebraska connections, Midwest connections, as well as national connections. And incidentally, there are people out there who escape Nebraska, are willing to return. And it's our job to be able to find those people and recruit them and say, you know, come on back to the heartland, come on back to the places that you know. I've simply listed some samples of the school districts that we've done in this particular metropolitan area. So we've done Bellevue, and by the two behind me is for the last two. So we did the search for Jeff Ruppy, the current superintendent, as well as Frank Harwood, the previous one. Lincoln Public Schools, we did Steve Joel. He was in one superintendent ago, 1 year back, I should say. Of course, John Schwartz has since taken that position, and of course, moving to Pataluma Vista and others in the metropolitan area. And for Pataluma Vista, Andy Rickley, we placed Andy there as superintendent, as well as Rick Black, his predecessor, an internal candidate, I might add. West Side, Mike Lucas. Lane did a great job of recruiting Mike Lucas for that position and asking and making sure the match was there. And there are others, but those at least you know that we're familiar with the metropolitan area, and certainly I think we've been able to illustrate that. What I'll also say is here's some other searches that we've done, and the number behind them will be the number of times we've done them. So a couple of ADAs in Iowa, for example, in the case of Green Hills ADA, we've done 4 times. Council Bluffs Schools done twice. It does not involve me, but most certainly Council Bluffs twice. Johnston Community Schools in Iowa is similar in terms of your school district. Indianola the same way. And just to illustrate that, we also have great connections in terms of more what I call districts on the edge of the metropolitan area, Riverside Community Schools in Iowa, Carson, Macedonia, Oakland. We are 4 times we've done that. We'll go back into the 80s in terms, it should be 90s in terms of that before superintendents. Sioux City we're currently doing, and just wrapping it up with this coming week, we'll be done with Sioux City. And then Urbandale, of course, it will be similar likewise in terms of the, and again, there are many others we could list, but at least you could see we've done districts similar to Bennington Public Schools. Okay. So the search timeline, well, that's something of great interest to you. Well, one thing that we'll sit down with you and do is we'll determine with you what timeline. And the first question we'll ask is when do you want to be done? And we'll advise you in terms of some components that I think is important to include. Do you want stakeholder involvement on the front end and the back end? If that's the case, well, it's going to take a little bit longer. In terms of that, we really focus on recruiting. Recruiting is an essential part of this particular job. It used to be you put an ad in the paper, you got some applicants, you put on your website, and then you had any number of applicants. It's like any other position we currently have in education, whether it's bus driver, whether it's cafeteria help, whether it's teacher associate, custodian, whatever it happens to be, the candidate pools are shrinking. So it's more emphasis on recruiting and having the kind of connections and the kind of links that allow you to be able to recruit these people who fit this particular community and fit this particular school district. So we'll set a timeline. We'll advise you in terms of a timeline. You ultimately will make that final determination upon our advice and counsel, but you make the decisions. We don't make the decision.
Okay, I'm going to take over, and we received something from you prior to this with some questions or things that you wanted to know. I'm going to try to answer them, maybe not sequentially, but in these next slides, I will try to answer those questions. It may save us some time through it all, and please interrupt me if I tend to rush things a little bit. I'm watching the clock here, trying to be respectful of your time. So please interrupt me if I'm not being clear. So, but this is just basically how we would be at the board involvement area first, and you can see how we will go through this. And again, as Dick said, we'll customize it to the certain components you want in your search. So we start with individual board interviews. You want to know how the board's involved. We will interview you individually. It's important for us to get to know you and get to know what you're really looking for in a superintendent, because what we're moving, the initial part is getting a profile of what you want in your next superintendent. We'll also work with you as a board to define who you want as your stakeholder groups. I'll talk a little bit more about the stakeholder groups later and how they should be involved. Again, Dick has talked about the timeline, and that's where we start from where you want to finish. And the key part, the largest part is the recruitment time. So, I think we gave you a sample interview here, but a lot depends on when you want to wrap up. So. We will assist in advertising, and again, we would not recommend advertising in newspapers any longer. Our website is probably the #1 place that we get recruits from, and we will suggest with you some other sites that some are free and some there is a cost, but you'll determine that. We'll also work with you to.
We'll also work with you in terms of job sites, online job sites, as well as and, you know, any other social media connections that you may do, that you may use with the assistance of your staff and your very capable individuals that handle your all of that work.
Yeah, through the whole process, we would suggest a portion of your website be dedicated to the superintendent search. That way you can keep the community informed as well. We'll work with you to determine a compensation range. I think we want to do that early on, and we'll present with you comparable school districts and make some suggestions for you as to where you would set that. You set that, we'll only bring you the data. And we contact you every week, and what we'll do is have one of us, and that's the lead, that's Dick, and there'll be a designated board member, and that's how we'll communicate with you to let you know what we're doing on a weekly basis. So, and again, it's your process, not ours. Some of the components are fairly basic, but certainly you have the decision-making power. For instance, stakeholder input is encouraged. And one of the ways that we've done focus groups before in your community, we found though that probably the most effective way is through an online survey, and we have an option for you. We partner with a company called K-12 Insight. That's no additional cost to you. And that's a survey we will do of your community. We also have one that we've developed ourselves, and you would have the choice over that. We have, in that survey, there's about 28 traits that we look at that we think are important for a superintendent as a leader. And they will also, with this K-12 Insight, we would suggest pushing it with your staff and even your students, at least your high school students, and trying to get as much input as you can from those sessions. And if you also want stakeholder groups to be involved somehow in interview process, we can do that as well. We'll assist you in training them and put together a framework that has been successful in other districts.
Just a little more about K-12 Insight. Again, it's no additional cost to you with a partnership with them. Their area of specialization is customer service, communications, and outreach. And they're very good at, and the survey focuses on, in addition to the 28 traits, being able to narrow that down, they also ask questions that they research that get at those particular issues. Again, customer service, communication, outreach.
So you will get some very valuable information from that survey, and more importantly, your next superintendent will have kind of direction to see strengths of the district, greatest needs of the district's greatest challenges facing.
We'll bring you two surveys and say which one you want to use. Here's the advantage of this one, here's the advantage of that one. We also have one that's a Google survey that's more focused and basic.
A little bit about stakeholder input. We would encourage that. We have some boards that choose not to do that, most do. But we want to have that early in the process so that we can get that profile done. Of course, survey is the main portion we do that, but you have to decide if you're going to have stakeholder groups involved in the interview process. And that would
Have you already decided?
Have you decided that yet?
Okay.
And that wouldn't be until you have your final, and in Nebraska, that would be final 4 candidates.
In Nebraska, you have to have 4 finalists or you announce the entire application list, which will shrink your application list.
That will really deter. If we're going to try to recruit people that are successful in their position, we're not going to recruit people that don't have a job. We want people that are successful, and it's a risk for them if they're in a good situation. So it's important to stay confidential until we have those 4 finalists. Here's some of the groups. I've got certified staff, classified staff, administrators, and then Dick and I usually fight over who gets to work with the students. That would be your decision, but that I think it's important to. I know you've got some students here in the back. I got a hunch that it's probably because they're meeting maybe a civics requirement. But that could get them involved also. And those groups would be 15 or smaller. That just, if you get into launching that doesn't work. Also, we would do candidate forums with the finalists if you would so desire that. Next week, Dick and I will be facilitating that, or you could have someone from your community do that. We'd help you set that up. We're having community meet and greets in Sioux City later this next week. So, probably our biggest thing is we're going to really recruit candidates, and you're going to ask, well, where do you get those candidates? Certainly, we will call AEAs, ESUs, we will call NCSA, we will call the administrative training institutions for names. We also take, when we do the survey, and when we interview you, we'll ask you, are there candidates you'd like us?
There's one thing I want to come back before we get to my politics for that. In terms of surveys, when we did West Side, working with our communications people and working with the board, we were able to secure almost 1,100 survey responses, which then you really have a strong voice. And every district has has listservs. Every district has people with connections that can help. We can meet with any community organization in order to make that connection. Now, that's a relatively high number for that size school district. And you're approaching that. You'll be there before in a couple of years. And we just did a job. We're doing a job in Kansas, maybe a district of DeSoto. It's a carbon copy of your district. We just finished the survey. We'll have 800 survey responses. Again, working with the communications people. We think we have, and they did not emphasize students. So they'd have well over 1,000 if they had emphasized students. So we can bring you really input that I think is significant and in numbers, as long as you're able to work with us, and I think that builds a great foundation for conducting the search. Sorry to interrupt that, but I didn't want to miss it.
No, I always defer to Obi-Wan Kenobi. I'm almost a Jedi. I'm getting close. So,
yes.
And we will go out and we will find these people. Dick and I start with a list that grows over time when asking for referrals. People we know in this area, Dick and I still have connections, even though we're getting a little old in the tooth. We know quite a few people. And we will put those together. We interview each of the candidates we think that will meet your profile. Quite honestly, there'll be people on that list that apply that we don't recruit, that we won't pursue because we know they don't meet your profile. We will interview them. We will do a reference check. We will do background checks through social media. And then we will bring you a list of candidates we think meet your profile. And when you will then, we may bring, depending on how you want to do this, we would strongly suggest you do this in 2 phases. We would have a scoring instrument for you. We think it's important that each individual board's voice is heard. So you will be evaluating candidates that we bring to you individually first, and then before you even have discussion. You will select, again, when it's either 1 or 2 rounds, we'll bring to you 10 to 12 names, depending on how many candidates we feel are qualified to serve as your suit. And then you will review their application materials, and you'll see a short video. Most firms do that now. It's about a 6-minute video. You will reach consensus on how you want to proceed to bring in other candidates. If you do, if then you go to a final round, if it's 4, we will help you put together the interviews for that. And during this time, also we'll be working with you. We would strongly suggest you involve your legal counsel on the contract, but we can help you along the way if we know what the contract looks like, the components. We won't negotiate that contract for you, but we will make the candidates aware of what's in that so that negotiations can go much smoother. And along the way, we will ask the candidates, are you all in? And then the second question, is your family all in? we don't like people dropping out on this, but,
Or you offering the job and the person saying, well, now I need to go talk to my family.
we have,
They need to be, if they're going to interview, they should have talked with their family and had a commitment, yes, mom or dad or whoever, yes, you can proceed with going to the next phase. We don't want to be in a situation where you make an offer and they say, well, my family's just not ready to go. They're going to make that determination earlier in the process. That's part of the recruitment process.
and part of it's getting to know the candidates. So if you have 2 rounds, we have seen where, oh gosh, it looks like there's a front runner right away, but that can change if you have multiple interviews. Your stakeholders, if they're involved, certainly they would be able to, we would work with them for interviews, but we make it very clear that they will not select, here's my favorite candidate, here's my second, here's my third. We have a process where they may fill out a form and just says strengths and weaknesses. And I'm sorry, that's a lot of information for you to go through, but that's what we promised them, that each board member will read the strengths and weaknesses of each candidate. It would be a disaster to have them select one.
Yes, so what it boils down to is you will see and read everyone's input that's participating. I think that's important, rather than summarizing, rather than rating, whatever the case might be, you're reading their individual. So if you're gonna have somebody participate in this particular process, then you wanna say to them, whatever you say to us, we're gonna read before we deliberate on who we're gonna hire.
And working with the stakeholder groups, we tell them that as well, that you're not gonna choose one. And you're again, the individual voice. They're not gonna discuss, well, what did you think? They fill those out individually. In fact, when we're in Sioux City, I don't know how many people will be at our public forum, but they'll each get the chance to do that, so. And then I know one of your questions, what else do you do besides that? We will certainly assist with the development of an entry plan and transition plan for your new superintendent. A lot of that data that we collect in the survey will be very helpful there. Because we do ask open-ended questions in the survey also. Anything that you would want the district or the superintendent candidate to know about the district.
So for example, we're just reading one right now for DeSoto, and of nearly 800 people who completed the survey, nearly half of them had a comment. The board members got those individual comments, unedited, exactly as written. So you're hearing what we hear, you're reading what we read. It isn't us interpreting or somebody else interpreting or summarizing.
We'll certainly look at trends to share with you. I can tell you that's one of the jobs. Both Dick and I read every one of those, and every one of the comments. So certainly we will provide any mentoring, coaching, advising along the way. Usually with our candidates, we will call them, see how things are going. Dick had a lot of experience during MOLA after that. And then my final job as an ADA chief administrator, I did a lot of that with young superintendents as well. We have a 2-year guarantee that if your superintendent leaves within 2 years, we will come back and do the search for only expenses. And you ask for a fee. The base fee is $11,500. And then any consultant expense, I can tell you from my home in the hills, picking up Dick and getting here was like 33 miles, so round trip would be 66.
Actually, you take from my house, getting closer.
Yeah, but I'm the driver.
Yeah.
Because I have the heavy foot. So that
won't ride with me.
Well, there's sometimes and then advertising expenses are also extra. And certainly those, some you have to do, like the AESA, because we're not members of it, but again, the websites are.
Our website drives it, and
Yes.
if you don't have a good website, if you're not connected, you're not going to generate a whole lot of people that are interested in it. I don't know, last time I checked on hits, it's hundreds a day.
typically, when we work with boards, one of the things we hear in the community is we want someone that knows Nebraska or knows the Midwest. There's a lot to that, but as Dick mentioned, there's a lot of people that have left Nebraska that had ties, or left Iowa that had ties. And one of the things that I think makes our company unique is the hundreds of, where are we at now? How many associates do we have? All over the United States. 50. And they will call us when we've got a guy in the Northwest, do you have anybody? We can recruit nationally if that's what you want as well. And we have the consultants that can help us there.
And he incidentally grew up just on the border of Nebraska and Iowa in subsidiary Kingsley, to be exact. Iowa. Sorry about that.
Jim Hager.
Jim Hager.
Yeah, and he worked at the Iowa City Community Schools long before I did. Got his doctorate there, so good guy. I think that may.
So what I want to come back to and I want to reemphasize is in terms of the stages. So we'll bring the application packets for the people we're recommending. You will read those application packets the same way we read them. We'll then summarize what we found when we interviewed them and their references. And we incidentally, when we get down to 4 or 5, 6 people, we also have an outside firm that does background check. We'll verify education, and no additional cost. We'll verify education, we'll verify previous jobs, driving record, finances, you name it, it's a complete background checks. So what we do in terms of background checks is extensive in terms of we interview references that they've listed and references they've not listed. So we get a thorough investigation. Rather than calling it references, it's an investigation, is what I would refer to it as. I think candidates appreciate that. So everybody has tripped along the way or made a mistake. It's better to know up front. If you identify a mistake up front, you'll be okay. If you find out after the fact, it's unacceptable. And I think the videos also tell you a lot. So you look through the written material, be surprised what you learn by watching a 6-minute video. Followed by interviews, if you do 2 rounds, listening to them twice and getting feedback in the second round. I think really enhances the information you have available and the perspectives that you have available before you.
Also in recruiting, I failed to mention the relationships that we made over the years. I didn't emphasize that enough. People that we have placed in jobs, we will call them and ask, do you have a good aspiring administrator? Certainly Bennington's large enough that you can have someone that has experience, but you may find someone in a larger school district that's been at an associate's level that certainly has had a lot of leadership responsibility as well. So I think anything else?
Questions?
Yes.
Yes, thank you. So we have about, 5 minutes or so for questions. I'm sure we'll run over a few minutes, but want to make sure everybody gets their questions answered. Chris, do you want to start this time?
Sure. Sure. You mentioned when you were talking about those stakeholders and their participation, that they would write strengths and weaknesses. Is that written, handwritten? Is that electronic?
Handwritten.
Handwritten. Okay.
And it's easier to collect, and it's easier to copy. If you submit it, you have to manage it. And I think it's safer when they submit it handwritten because there's no opportunity to edit it in any manner.
Also, they have the option of signing their name or not signing their name. But the groups will be identified for you.
Thank you.
So it's not electronic, so the information we're getting back or feedback's all in paper.
Yes.
So how do we do that? How does that
When we
work?
make copies, we'll have copies for you.
So they'll have to come in, so the public, for instance, will have to come to the district office or get it?
Well, if the public's going to participate, then generally they're going to participate because they came to a session. Hear candidates. It isn't like, how else is the public going to know the candidates if they haven't?
Oh, okay, I'm sorry. You're talking about a report.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So, any more questions?
You guys go ahead, I may have one more at the end, but can wait.
So I'm thinking more stakeholder engagement as far as the interview process.
Yes.
So how does that work? Explain that, as far as the questions, like if they're gonna ask
The
questions.
development of questions, absolutely, and what we do is we have each individual participating develop their own question. So and everyone who's on the interview group asks at least a question. So it isn't somebody asking questions and then listening. The other thing we do with that particular group is we sit down with them and we have example questions of similar groups. And we'll sit down, we'll work with them in developing their questions. Well, of course, ensure that there's no illegal questions or inappropriate questions, but rarely have we had to, well, we give them some guidance. If here's some questions you can't ask. And we give them some guidance in terms of what they can and can't ask. And what I found is rarely do we have to provide any guidance because people are here because they want to be a part of the decision-making process and want the best outcome for the district, not for themselves.
Thank you.
Just want to clarify how many other searches you're doing now and making sure you have the manpower to make sure you're providing us.
Well, unlike many other firms, we do this full-time. So we don't have another gig. When we're not superintendent somewhere else, we don't have association responsibilities somewhere else. That's our commitment. We only do no more than 2 at a time. So we're wrapping up Sioux City. Sioux City will be done. We're doing a job in Kansas right now. You'll be the next one up.
My second question relates to stakeholder input, and it looks like you're interviewing the board first to establish the profile of the position.
The profile.
What if
is
we
also-
want to have the stakeholders on the front end to help us develop that?
That's what we just said,
Okay.
but we didn't explain.
Okay, I just want to
And
make
the
sure.
survey, the survey really gives, we found, my son is a techie and he says, late, Dad, if I can get my answer without talking to a person, I'm going to do that. And we found that the participation in public, certainly we could have forums and do this face-to-face. We found attendance has really dropped and the survey itself is an easier way to do it. We can do both.
However, if you feel, now, about half the time, 2/3 of the time, we also meet with groups up front.
Right.
Okay.
On the front end, before the survey. So in fact, we say there'll also be a survey. So, we'll go as broadly, and this depends, this varies from district to district. You know your district better than we know your district. If you say, we want to meet with groups up front, how many and when and where, we're willing to do it.
I did Montgomery County, Virginia last summer. We did 17 focus groups and 6 public meetings in 2 days. We can certainly do a combination. I don't think you need that many.
No problem.
And I'm not, that just may be this board member's preference, but we haven't decided. I just want to make sure that was an option.
Oh, absolutely.
And then,
Cost, what would be the additional cost?
None.
Like that, it's all included?
Yes.
my last question is, you guys have been doing this a long time. So what is one thing you wish boards knew at the outset, kind of at the beginning of the process, that they don't quite realize?
Recruiting is the critical component. You need a firm that can reach out and find people who are satisfied in the job they currently have, that they match the profile. You don't want to be limited to people who are looking for a job, need a job, or looking for the next step in their career. You're best served when you have somebody that's here more than 3 or 4 or 5 years, so they can follow through, so the results are apparent. It takes a while for that to occur.
And also good counsel of the board is this process is a 2-way process. Your candidates will be interviewing you as well to see if it's a match for them.
And your community groups, and the interview groups. It is truly 2-way for the talented people that aren't looking for a job.
Great, thank you, that was helpful.
You'd mentioned you'd give us advice on establishing a timeline. What advice would you give to a board with regards to a timeline, starting a search for a superintendent at this time of year?
We can be done late March, maybe early April, depending on how much of additional meetings you want us to do. Now, keep this in mind. A couple of years ago, we did a search. We started the first Sedell in Iowa. We started the 1st of June and finished July. Yep.
Yeah, it was the 5th, because I went back, you were recovering from hip surgery.
Yeah, but we were able to compress some components and we make it work. But ideally, it's the recruiting period. If you truly have a firm that's recruiting, it takes a while to convince potential candidates that this is the place for them. You gotta give them time. You gotta give them time to process, time to think about it. I think to a certain extent, just because we think there might be a shortage, that we're beginning to rush things a little bit. We're afraid we're gonna be left out. Left out of who? People looking for a job, one less person looking for a job, if that's who your pool is. If, on the other hand, you're recruiting people who probably aren't gonna apply anywhere else, then, it takes care of itself.
And to do the job right, and I know Dick, and I know Dick does it right, because he taught me. It takes a while to find those candidates, interview them, and track down their references. So sometimes you're at and that's why being retired helps. So I don't golf. I just, they won't interrupt me there, and I ride my bike very early in the morning. I'm done before 8, so.
Thank you very much for everything so far. On the sample regional searches, I see that some schools have 4, some have 2. Can you tell me why there would be 4 on 1? I mean, is it people retiring? Is it people they weren't liking?
Oh, not at all. Believe me, I wouldn't list anybody who wasn't successful.
I wouldn't think so either.
Yeah.
I need to ask.
He's old, that's why.
Okay, well, we did Riverside 4 times.
Yep.
That goes back to the 90s.
Okay.
Early 90s. So was there 7 years, 12 years, 8 years, they retired.
Thank you.
Christy, did you want to
That
jump
was
back to you?
actually one of my questions, but I did want to ask, if you have internal candidates, how do you protect the integrity of the process with internal candidates?
They have the same opportunity as any other candidate. The worst thing you can do for an internal candidate is give them an interview when, if they were from somewhere else, you would not have. Sometimes it's referred to as a courtesy interview. That, I think, is mistreating your employees. We'll go through the process. If there's somebody internal that meets the profile, then we're going to advance them and we're going to convince you that they're a great candidate.
That's also a question we'll be asking you in our one-to-one interview. Are there internal candidates? Are there other candidates you'd like us to pursue?
We ask everybody,
That too, on the survey. And we follow up.
and person to person in terms of meeting with groups.
And so if that internal candidate doesn't meet our criteria that we've placed, you wouldn't even put them in front of us moving forward, correct?
No,
No, we'll say here they are, here's our recommendation. If you want to move them forward, that's fine.
because when we come to you with, I mentioned that 10 to 12, we will also bring our whole box full of other applications and share with you all those names. If you want to look at those, past our 12 that we bring, that would be fine.
And we can explain every single one,
Why?
and this is a great candidate, but you got, in the case of Sioux City, we had 23 applicants, we narrowed down to 16. Sioux City Board didn't want to spend 2 days with us wading through 16 candidates. They said, now what do we hire you to do?
Internal candidates are different in different jobs as well. So we have experience with that.
I was an internal candidate. I was an internal candidate at Council Bluffs.
I was in Grand Island, didn't get it the first time, second time I did. And I didn't have to interview. So.
And I wouldn't have wanted to be interviewed if I hadn't earned it in competition.
Anybody else? Thank you both for your time and for coming on this Friday evening. I appreciate it. It was very helpful for us.
Do you want to make a decision this evening?
If there's a motion and people vote, yes.
Fully understand.
Yes.
You may have to. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
I used to drive bus right up to the line here for Blair, when I was in college. So,
Thank you. Nice to meet you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thanks so much.
Thank you very much. Yeah, time.
That's a good deal.
Do you guys need a break?
Thank you very much.
Dr. Hawk, I know we're behind schedule, Dr. Hawk. Dr. Hawk. I know we're behind, can you take 5 minutes? Okay. So I need to formally recess the meeting or can we just?
Be good.
Okay.
Just, you can recess the meeting and say a time, 5 minutes.
We're gonna recess the meeting for about 5 minutes. I know we're a little bit behind, but I think we've been here for a while. Everybody could use just a break for just a minute. So we'll recess and be back in 5 minutes. That'll put us at 3 after or so.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody, for hanging in there. Are they up? Oh.
Yeah,
That'd be nice.
that'd be some nice. Forest is top 5. So it's a nice.
technology side? Okay, perfect. Thank you all. I know we're running a little bit behind schedule. I'm sorry about that. I think it's been a valuable discussion, so worth the time, I think, and hopefully everybody's finding it useful. You guys want to take a second and introduce yourselves, and then we're going to try to keep it to 30 minutes. I know we've run over, so we'll give you that same opportunity. Please make sure you give us time for questions. We have had questions. So with that, I'll let you guys take it over.
Yeah, thank you very much. So my name is Mike Lucas. I'm here with Derek Joel. He'll introduce himself in a minute, representing McPherson and Jacobson. So I've been a consultant with Mac and Jake since 2005, and I just completed my 40th superintendent search in Nebraska and Kansas. It's kind of funny because I'm a consultant for Mac and Jake because in 2003, Derek's dad did the search through McPherson and Jacobson in Franklin, Nebraska, and I was lucky to get that job, and I loved the Mac and Jake process so well on the applicant side that I bugged Dr. Jacobson until he let me become a consultant in 2005. And so just love what we do with Mac and Jake.
And as Dr. Lucas said, my name is Derek Joel. I've been a consultant since 2015, I believe. Working a lot of searches with Dr. Lucas, got into the business, as he mentioned, because of my father, and just love to do it. So thanks for having us.
And so at your place, we have 3 handouts for you. We have a presentation packet that's really more of a reference for you, and we're not even going to go through that tonight. And then we have what we call kind of like our cliff notes, which covers everything in the packet. And so I'm going to start off with a handout that says why McPherson and Jacobson in red, okay? And we'll go through that, and we certainly want to allow plenty of time for questions. So the things that we believe at McPherson and Jacobson that set us apart, you know, we're a nationally recognized search firm right here in your own backyard. We're located in Omaha, Nebraska. We've been around since 1991. There's actually an entity out there that ranks superintendent search firms in the country. We're ranked number 2 in the entire nation, and we're 20 minutes away. We are a Nebraska-based company. We certainly understand Nebraska values and Nebraska educational issues. I'm in my 20th year as a superintendent in Nebraska, 6 years in Franklin, 10 in York, and now 4 at Omaha West Side. And we love what Mac and Jake stands for. The communication, collaboration, and timeliness of Mac and Jake. We involve as many stakeholders as you want to be involved. We involve students, support staff, teachers, administrators, community members, parents, whoever you want to be involved. Our process easily and professionally allows for that. We have a lot of face-to-face involvement with as many groups as you want. We have online surveys, and we do a lot of work with your communications department and your school district to make sure everybody from, you know, the folks that have their youngest child is 60 and they're still paying taxes to Bennington, we want them to be in the know just as much as the English department at the high school. That's a big, big deal to us. And being active school administrators, we understand the urgency and the importance of communication. And that's really a big part of our process because it's an inside-out communications plan that we use. We'll start by having the superintendent search tab put on your website, and we want to make sure that your staff gets all the information first, and then it goes out, 30 minutes later to your community. Because the worst thing that can happen is pretty demoralizing for staff when they go downtown to get some groceries on the way home and they get hit up in the milk and eggs aisle about something and they're like, oh, I don't know. I just work here. I don't know what's going on. And so communication is really, really big to us. We're ready to get going right now. We actually have a sample timeline that Derek's going to go over with you in a minute. And so the timeliness and urgency is something we handle all the time. Mac and Jake has a tremendous amount of respect, credibility, and affordability. Again, ranked number 2 in the nation. And when applicants see McPherson and Jacobson, they know it's going to be a very professional, well-done search. We have in our consultant pool, we have former superintendents, active superintendents, professors, board members, people from all walks of life, and we really work well together to to put on a great search. We have a guarantee with our process. Our base fee for this search is $9,000. And then we guarantee through the first 2 contract years of you new hire, if anything goes wrong during that time, or your new hire wins the lottery and says, hey, we're retiring, we come back in and do the search for free. And that's something that we stand by. Again, our base fee is $9,000. Then your maximum cost is $12,008, because then that adds your advertising expenses and those types of things. But what we are going to propose to you is to not have any dollars spent on national advertising, so we won't get close to that $12,800 for the total max cost. Okay. The follow-through piece is really big for McPherson and Jacobson. That's why I wanted to become a consultant, because I went through that as a superintendent. And so we know what a huge decision this is for you. And so the best thing we do, in my opinion, in all 40 searches that I've done as a consultant, is we'll come in this summer or late spring, whatever works for you and your new hire, and we'll do what we call phase 5. And we will lead you and them through goal setting, collaborative goal setting that will turn into an evaluation instrument, because you'll need to evaluate your new superintendent twice next year, once per semester. We create all of that for you. We walk that through you, with you. There'll be a lot of great team building and collegiality as this new board comes together as part of that process. Before I turn it over to Derek to give you some more details on the timeline of what we do at each of our meetings, I just want to highlight at the bottom of this first page of the handout above my cell phone number are 3 references, what others have to say, because what Mary Rorty at Ralston, I just finished their search 2 weeks ago. What she has to say about our process is way more important than what I have to say. So I'd encourage you to call Mary, Jim, or Craig, and they can tell you about Derek and I as consultants. So Derek, you want to talk calendar sample and process?
Yep, absolutely. So when you flip over the sheet that Mike just gave you, you're going to see a search calendar, and that is a sample. So time is of the essence. As Mike shared, we are here to work for and with you guys through a successful search. And so there are really 3 really key dates, and those dates are the 3 meetings that we will have together. And so when you look at the timeline, we're proposing, and again, these dates are interchangeable. Everybody has busy schedules, so we will make sure we'll sync up calendars. But you'll see we're proposing a start date of the end of January with a completion date in the middle of March. And so on that first date, you're going to see Board of Education meeting number 1. Mike and I come in, we sit down, and we really get the input from you. So what we're going to look at is we're going to look at establishing the search criteria. We're going to put together the advertising plan. We're going to create the press release, finalize the timeline, make sure all of our dates match. And then that Mike already talked about that inside out communication. So we're going to lay out the communications plan that we're going to have, that we make sure staff have that access to information first, followed by making sure we're communicating out to the community, the public, and everybody involved. And then there we will lay out what we talk about the involvement of our staff and our community, and just overall the transparency piece that we have to the process, making sure that we engage stakeholders. And again, that falls on the shoulders of Mike and I. You'll see for an advertisement on February 3rd through the 23rd, advertise the position. During that advertising time, that's where Mike and I are on the phone, emails, we're calling. Being superintendents in the state is great. We have a lot of contacts, we know a lot of people. And so that's really not only the recruiting time, but that's open for the application piece as well. So we're really hitting the road. We're using what we've established in meeting number 1, search criteria, and we're going out and we're finding the best potential possible candidates and talking about how awesome Bennington is and the opportunity that the position has. February 7th or 8th, Mike and I would come back to Bennington, and it would be school community input meetings. And these input meetings are extremely important. We're going to ask for groups of students. We are going to ask for groups of staff, again, working with our point of contact here in Bennington. We're also gonna ask for community members, and we've done the community input meetings a variety of different ways. We still love the face-to-face model, so coming in and sitting down with each of those groups and really getting to know, what are the great things that Bennington has to offer as a community? What are you most proud of the Bennington community schools? Most importantly, we're gonna ask, what are the hot topics of the district? And we're gonna take all of the data that we collect, we're going to condense it initially for the Board of Education, and we're gonna present that to you guys. At the end of the process, you guys will get all of that data, all of the questions, because we live in a technological world. There's also going to be a link on the website that people could go on and they can complete the online survey. So not only will people have access to the face-to-face with Mike and I, but they'll be able to go online and fill out the link. And you guys get the raw data from all of that. That also becomes important, as Mike talked about phase 5. We'll bring back that data and we'll work with the Board of Education and we'll work with the new hire on what do we find from a theme perspective in that data, and how can we incorporate that into the first and second year, the goal setting, but also part of that evaluation process. So very, very important. Board of Education meeting number 2, February 15th or 16th. That's where we will initially give you the themes that we have from our face-to-face meetings. Again, you won't get the spiral bound raw data from the online piece until towards the end of the search. This is where we talk about interview questions, interview schedule, and the procedures of the interview process that we use. What we are looking at, and if you jump down to March 13th and 14th, we're looking at interviews of 2 candidates per day. Now, when it comes down to candidates, the Board of Education has access to everyone or anyone who applies to that position. And so we will go through a process with you guys on how to narrow that pool based on using search criteria, references that we're calling and going through that vetting process. So really, really important when we get down to the finalists, 3 or 4 individuals, but typically 2 candidates a day. But there is an asterisk there. Because of busy schedules, we are willing to build any schedule that the board can fit into your schedules. It's just really important that on that day, and for meetings 1, 2, and 3, that all board meetings or all board members are present for the process, just with the big decision that's coming. So we'll talk about the interviews, we'll talk about meals, we'll talk about setup, and then everything that comes with that interview process. It's there that we'll look at the salary array, we'll look at a sample contract, we'll start talking about housing, how do we get a list of potential housing in the district. But most importantly, that salary array is something that is developed by us and shared with you with an open and transparent conversation around superintendent salary, superintendent benefits, and everything that comes in there. And then we talk about spouses and families on interviews, and just the part of the interview of if the candidates bring their spouse, significant other, how important it is to have a spouse, significant other program with the interview. February 24th, your application deadline, which is the closing date for that, followed by March 8th, which is the meeting number 3. And that meeting is one in which is very important, because that's where we are going to discuss candidates and we're going to select finalists on that evening for the interviews and plug them into the schedule that's created. You'll see committees at 4, board meeting at 6:30. So part of this process and that application process is to carve out time for committees to meet in committees of 3, to review the applicants, to review their material, to review their one-way video, so that you guys can get a better understanding of who they are as a candidate and the experiences and what they're going to be able to bring to Bennington. So we meet in committees for roughly 2.5 hours to review, and then we go back to the board meeting, and that is where the Board of Education selects their finalists to bring in for the interviews. I talked about the interviews. with a final date of March 16th and 17th, where there will be a special meeting to approve the contract of the new hire.
And again, this is just, a sample timeline. Those dates are not locked in. We have a lot of flexibility, but that just kind of gives you an idea of the pieces of the search. Okay, really quickly, then the last handout we'll go over before we open up for questions has the Great Bennington Badger logo on the top of it. Love that. West Side, we're always confused with the Wisconsin W, and you guys have kind of the Wisconsin Badger. But so some frequently asked questions, how do we gather input from board, employees, stakeholders? We do that with those face-to-face meetings. We love the staff and community input meetings. Those are open forums. We want any and every taxpayer, patron, grandparent, whoever wants to attend those, we want them to know they're welcome. Everybody's voice is welcome. And we do those, and then again, that Survey Monkey is a really big piece so that people can weigh in. We recruit possible candidates and applicants through a lot of different ways. We have an applicant database where people can go in on our website. It gets over 40,000 hits a month, and people can say, hey, I want to know when any Nebraska superintendency is open. I want to know when a Class B job is open, or so on. And our applicant database is very robust and always getting updated. Again, just by being in the job and being with part of so many searches, we know who's looking. And I can tell you, Bennington, regardless of what search firm you hire, Bennington's going to get a lot of attention. This is an amazing opportunity. I don't need to tell you, you know better than I do, your location, your reputation, your size, everything that you have, people are excited about this opportunity. And you'll see Derek and I at the State Education Conference, in Omaha the week before Thanksgiving every year. And we're always talking to people, and it's about, hey, what job's going to open up? When do you think this job's going to open up? When do you think that job's going to open up? You're going to get a lot of great applicants. We recruit through social media, through colleges and universities. We teach college and university classes as well, so we know who's up and coming and all of that. We do complete background checks on finalists. We vet candidates through traditional methods. We stalk them on social media like everybody does. We call references, but really more importantly, we call non-references. That's the biggest thing. The last two questions we'll ask of references are, is there anybody else you think I should talk to about this candidate? And is there anything out there that if it became public would embarrass McPherson and Jacobson or the Bennington Badgers? And we make a lot of phone calls. And to be honest, I don't know how you do it, but the reference calls, those are 5 to 10 minutes because everybody lists people are going to say nice things about. I do on my resume, right? And we really put stock into the non-references, and that's a big part of our process.
So I also, sorry to interrupt, but I think it's important that when you get the final candidate sheet from all of the work that we've done, that is just full of everything that we have developed in regards to their leadership, their ability to connect with students and staff, develop relationships, everything. So those one page on top of the application material and everything, that is a true summary of the hours that we put in to vet each of those candidates for the Board of Education.
And yeah, just know we ask the tough questions. We leave no stones unturned because our reputations are on the line too. And we take enough criticism in our real jobs. We don't want to be criticized in our consultant jobs. And so we take that part very serious. How do we help the board select candidates for an interview? And again, I'm so glad Derek said it. We present all the candidates to you. We don't hide any from you. Okay, so if you have 30 folks that apply, you're going to have access to all 30. Now, based on the criteria that you set in meeting 1, where we ask you, what are the skills, characteristics, and traits you're looking for in the next superintendent? That's going to steer our entire search, okay? Those are the questions we're going to be asking your community, your staff, and stuff as well. But everybody gets a fair shot. We will come in to meeting number 3. We'll have a tiered system. We'll say, you know what? Based on the criteria you set, based on all the research we've done on these applicants, you had 20 total applicants. We feel like this 8 is the top tier. And you're gonna have videos to watch and all that, really get a name and a face put together, and a ton of time in committee work. And almost always the finalists that you select, we always go into it with the idea of 4, sometimes boards select 3, sometimes they select 5, comes out of that top tier. But you have access to what we think are the tier 2 and tier 3 applicants as well. So I want to make sure we're very clear on that. A common interview process, again, we've done it every way you can imagine. In my 40 searches, it's been 4 in one day, 2 a day, whatever. We can build that around your schedules. But it's typically a 90-minute slot for boards of education with each finalist. During meeting number 2, we're going to help you create your interview. 20 to 24 questions is the typical model. And we have a huge bank of interview questions that you can select from. We'll actually put some samples together for you based on the criteria that you set during meeting 1. But we won't leave meeting number 2 until we have your interview questions the way that you want them. Going back, while we're talking about interview process, we also love to have meet and greet groups involved with finalists as well. We don't call them interview committees, although we will work with your different groups to create interviews, questions as well. But typical model, and it'll all be decided by you, a student group, a support staff group, a teacher group, an administrator group, a parent community group. And they will all have an opportunity, if you want them to interact with finalists. With your help, we'll select chair people for each of those committees. We'll work with them to make sure they get to ask questions and provide feedback to you on each of the finalists as well. So that's a typical interview process. You see the timeline, again, rough draft. Additional support, yes, we do the salary array as part of meeting number 2, so you have an idea what your competitors are paying. Whether you look at your array that you use for teacher negotiations, your conference, whatever, you tell us who you want to know about, we bring that to you. That's a big part of the auxiliary services we provide. We help with contract negotiations when it gets to that, between you and your top choice. But again, the best thing we do is the goal setting and the creating of the performance objectives evaluation instrument that you're going to use next year. We talked about a breakdown of our costs. Again, base fee $9,000, total max of $12,800 that we won't get close to. And then the very bottom, what do we offer that others may or may not? First of all, I want to say all the search firms that are here tonight do a good job. They're all good people. I don't think you can make a wrong decision. And you have an amazing thing going here at Bennington, so it's going to be a great search. We certainly hope we get to be a part of it, but we're going to root for you whether we do or don't. But our time-tested strategies to involve lots of stakeholders, our transparency, our professional approach to recruit top-end applicants, and all the follow-through things that we do really set us apart. And our ties with Nebraska, knowing the legislative issues coming our way and everything else, we feel really help separate McPherson and Jacobson. We would be working only on this search. We have a lot of consultants all across the country, but Derek and I are locked in on Bennington only. We're not working on Bennington and a couple other searches. You have our full attention. So, what questions do you have for us?
There's a lot out there.
Yeah.
Thank you. If anybody can jump in. Go ahead.
So as far as your searches, I know you guys are dedicated to us, so who's handling the state board looking for the commissioner? Because I believe that you guys do.
Is that?
Yeah, different consultants.
Okay.
So, we have quite a few in the state. And so, yeah, we only focus on one at a time. So we have nothing to do with it.
And nothing, I mean, it is so compartmentalized. Yeah, nothing. It might as well be going on a million miles away because we just have to lock you in.
Yeah, no worries.
Yeah.
What, you said something right away at the beginning there, no national search, is that what you said, or did I hear that wrong?
We would recommend, so part of the difference between base fee of $9,000 and then the total max of $12,800 is mostly going to depend on your advertising. We don't recommend doing national advertising in national journals, especially with the quick time.
Okay.
Yeah, and that advertising over the last 4 years has skyrocketed to get into a national journal. And so it's just, might not be worth the dollars.
I just did the Ralston search, again, very successful search. They ended up hiring an internal candidate, but had four really good finalists and some really good non-finalists. And we advertised a little bit nationally and didn't see any bang for the buck.
What was the time frame on that one then? Can you tell me?
Yes, sir. Their superintendent announced retirement in October. We started late October and they interviewed January 4th, 5th.
Okay. Yep. Thank you.
We were worried on that one of going out too early. There is such a thing as too early, believe it or not.
Is there any advice you would give to a board when they're doing a search for a superintendent starting at this time of year?
Have some urgency, but don't rush.
Okay.
I mean, and that sounds weird, but we got to get those calendars coordinated. Like Derek said, it's so important to have all 6 of them here once we get meetings 1, 2, and 3, and certainly the interviews. So have some urgency, but enjoy the process. It's one of the biggest things you'll do as a board.
Well, just follow on that, the timeline you gave, is this a typical timeline you would utilize? Have you changed it at all?
It's a little quicker. It's a little quicker. Normally what we like to have between we normally like to advertise for about 27 days. I think we're proposing 20 days here, but we feel really good about that because people know Bennington's open. And people can't wait for you to select a firm because they want to apply pronto. So we're not worried, that you're gonna. And then the second thing is, in a perfect world, we'll have 2 full weeks, 14 days between application deadline and the time that we come back for meeting 3. I think we have 10 or 11 or 12 days here. That's not going to be a problem with this search because there's going to be a lot of people are going to apply early.
Thank you.
My question relates to time. So you guys obviously have busy day jobs, and I just want to make sure that you actually have the time to put in, and how do you manage all that? I'm in awe that you can do both and still do this part well.
Yeah.
And I want to make sure we have your full attention. We haven't done this in 19 years.
Right.
This is a huge decision for all of us. And
Right.
so I need to know that when we call you during the day, we get hold of you
Yeah.
and those kinds of things. So can
Yeah.
you elaborate on the time?
For sure, yeah. So this is my 20th year as a superintendent, and I've done 40 superintendent searches during that time, and you have to be a phenomenal time manager. We do a lot of this over our lunch hour, or actually it's a lunch 30 minutes. Do a lot and then weekends and evenings. So I'm glad I'm here. Don't get me wrong, just came out wrong. I could have been at the West Side Papillion La Vista basketball game tonight. But what we would do is working the phones in between the girls and boys game. I mean, you use Saturday mornings, you use Sunday afternoons, Sunday nights, and you just make it work because we're used to juggling 1,000 things every day anyway. And yeah, you make it work. And that's why I'd encourage you to call Mary or any of those references because we take extreme pride in responsiveness and accessibility. That's a big deal because you're right. You can't send us a text or leave us a phone message at 7:38 in the morning and not hear from us until 2 o'clock in the afternoon. That's unacceptable. We find the time to make it work.
And I'll just second what Mike said. I think it comes down to time management. But in today's world with cell phones, text messages, emails, we always find time to respond. But I also think it's important that, as we shared earlier, this is the only search that Mike and I will work during this time frame. So, I mean, our dedication, our time, our energy, everything is focused on Bennington. And I mean, that's the guarantee we have.
Another thing really quick on that, Allison, we're super organized because we have to be or we can't survive in our real jobs. And so like an example is just because of our respect for Bennington, again, whether we get the search or not, we want the Badgers to do awesome. This couple days ago, this past Wednesday, the snow day, I emailed Terry a document. It's called like the vacancy cheat sheet. And so doesn't matter what search firm you choose, they're gonna need to have pictures of your building and staff and students. They're gonna need to know your tax request, your budget, how many students you have, demographics. And so we already have that in the hopper for whatever firm you choose, just gotta be organized.
And then remind me the cost on phase 5, is that included?
It's included.
Okay, perfect, thank you.
My question is having to do with the internal candidates. You mentioned in Ralston that was the case. How do you maintain the integrity of the process and fairness with an internal candidate?
Yeah, great question. So the best way I can say that is you treat all candidates the same. And so your internal candidates, and we had 2 in Ralston, 2 of the 4 finalists were internal. The internal candidates have access to all the same information as applicants from central Nebraska. And they don't participate in any of the meetings that their peers do that are going to be on the meet and greet committee and those types of things. And we will talk to all of your applicants, external and internal. We'll make sure they know the timeline. We'll make sure they know the process. We'll make sure they know where to go to get questions answered. We're accessible for them, but they have to earn it. What boards have told us over the years when they have internal candidates, they love having a search firm because if in fact the internal candidate comes through, they had to earn it. And they have a lot more credibility from their staff than if it was just handed to them. So that's the best way I can answer it.
Can I ask one more question?
Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry. No, go ahead.
No, just one other question I had is obviously with your jobs as superintendents in our area, how do you keep your own personal lives of your contacts from entering into this process?
Yeah, you just have to be really wickedly good at compartmentalizing, and, hey, I'm Mike Lucas West Side right now, but at 5 o'clock, I'm Mike Lucas, McPherson, and Jacobson, and you just have, we take ethical pledges and those types of things, and that's a big part of what McPherson and Jacobson is about, with the integrity and just the transparency of how we do things. It actually works maybe the opposite way of what you all might think, because it's hard, because as consultants, we can't make all the applicants happy, and we actually lose some friends because we don't select the finalists for the board selects the finalists, and so we just have to keep it very professional, very compartmentalized.
And I think with the process that we use, we may see individuals at meetings and, come across at different sporting events and everything. But at the end of the day, the information that we're sharing with the Board of Education comes from the extensive research that we do. And there is nothing in there about what we may know of them professionally or something that we saw at a meeting. It is straight from the references, it's straight from the conversations we're having. And so again, I think it's not difficult because as Mike shared, we're presenting all the information that we have and that we know with you guys, and you're taking that information. Again, everything goes back to that search criteria, and you guys are picking the finalists. We're here to gather the information and present the information. And then it's your job to go. So, at the end of the day, it's your search.
The other thing to add to that is if there is an applicant that has a personal connection to one of us, say there's an applicant that I used to work with, I don't research him. Derek does. So we don't muddy those lines at all. In the rare instance that there would be an applicant that we both worked with or were friends with or were third cousins with, then we call in an outside consultant to put together the profile. Yeah.
Thank you.
It's a great question.
Yeah, great question.
A real quick one, if you don't mind. Of the 40 searches that you have done the past, whatever, is there a percentage that stay internal? Do you know that?
Ah, boy, that's a great one. I mean, most of the searches I've done don't have internal candidates, okay? Of the searches, I would say probably 10 of the 40 had internal candidates, okay? And I'm just trying to go through my head really quick. 4 or half of those hired internal.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you.
That's a real
It's all
rough.
new to me, so I didn't.
Oh, yeah.
That's great. Thank you.
One last question. I saw in your packet that you do not solicit folks that you placed. So you do not go after people that you placed in superintendent jobs to come, for example, to Bennington. And I just want to make sure that that's not going to impact our applicant pool, because you guys are so big, you've done so many searches. At some point, does that limit the pool for us?
Well, so
Not that I want you to, I don't
No.
want to say that's a bad
No,
thing, but that caught my eye.
we don't as consultants, so if I did the Hastings search a couple years ago, okay? I would not go after anybody who Hastings interviewed or hired, but somebody else could in our firm.
Okay, thank you.
And again, I don't want to overstate this, but a lot of people are excited to try and be a Bennington Bachelor. So,
Any other questions from the board? Thank you both for your time.
thank you. Have a great weekend. And I hope you all beat Norris tonight. My York Dukes beat the Norris girls for the first time in a long time.
They did.
Tuesday night, so.
They did.
Fine.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
She's actually at the end of the paragraph, 26, 24. You had that happening path.
Get it
I
done.
didn't eat today, so I'm struggling.
I'm gonna wither away.
Thank you. Hi. Hello, everybody. Bet you guys are getting a little tired.
Always takes longer than you think.
There's only 4 more after us.
Yeah. Gonna be here all night.
This should only take another.
Thank you
We're
very
gonna
much.
take, yes, we're gonna give
Good
you
job.
lunch, nap time, on the kindergarten run, right? There you go. You are welcome to 2 more copies because I do have an extra one.
If you have an extra.
Yes. Even says extra copy on it, in case I forgot.
All right, I think we're going to wrap up this evening with the Nebraska Association of School Boards. And just to give you guys a benefit, we do have folks watching remotely. So please make sure you're speaking into the microphone so that everybody can hear you. And we're going to try to keep it to 30 minutes. I know we've gone over, so we will allow you that same time if you would like it. Please allow us time for questions. We will have questions at the end. So I guess we'll turn it over to you to introduce yourselves and
Very good. Thank you very much for having us. We really do appreciate being invited to come and offer the proposal in person. So it's really nice to see you all. And my name is Sherry Becker. I'm the Director of the Search Service at NASB. And I have with me.
Hi, I'm Colby Kawash. I'm the Associate Executive at the Nebraska Association of School Boards. I also serve as your Government Relations Director. But I'm also support for Sherry and all that she does as well.
So, all right, well, we are going to walk through the proposal here, and I know that there were a few things that were emailed out to as additional questions, which we had a lot of in the proposal already. So we're going to go through and talk about the process. And I think one of the most important things to mention is just, obviously, you have 3 new board members, 3 existing board members, right? So part of the process is really going to be getting to know each other and working together. And so I think it's really important that NASB has the opportunity to have a role in that. I know I mentioned a little bit in the cover letter of this, which you may have seen a copy of already, but we do have Gallup Strength Finders that we can do simultaneously with the search process and a lot of other tools that are at disposal. So we'll be sure that we talk about that a little bit as we go on, but it's a great way to learn how to be good team members and work well together. So we're excited about that part of the search. So we're going to start talking on page, let's just go on. I want to talk a little bit on page 2 about my experience. I already mentioned I'm the Director of the Search Service, and I've actually been with the NASB Search Service since 2007. So I started out as a consultant and I worked with Marcia Herring, and some of you may have had the opportunity to meet her at the new board member workshop in La Vista. And so I worked with her from 2007 until 2013 when I became the director. So I've been with the search service for quite some time, have a lot of experience there. And then I also, as I mentioned, have my Gallup Certified Strength Coach certification, and also I am approved as a mediator. So I have a lot of tools in my toolbox there. And then Colby already mentioned his experience. He's on page 3 there. We're going to move on to page 4 and talk about the actual search service protocol. So this is the nuts and bolts of the process. And I'm guessing, since this is the 4th one that you've listened to tonight, some of that might be a little bit similar in the ways that we move about things, but I'm guessing some of them are unique to our process as well. So the preliminary work, I think it's important to talk about what do we do. If you hire an ASB, we of course would post that position on our site immediately. We can do that tonight, tomorrow, whenever we're contacted. That will get done right away. You may want us to meet with some people in your district office, your communications director or media person, to talk about the rest of the advertising. But we typically do roll that advertising out as quickly as possible. And then that initial meeting with the central office personnel that might need to be done. We will create a marketing flyer and of course include any language on there that they may want on there as well. And then we'll need to do some sort of a board work session to start developing. Of course, our timeline is going to be very critical with a search this time of year, especially. We want to make sure that we are efficient, but that we also take all of the steps necessary to make sure this is a robust search process. So we want to get that timeline done. We want to talk about the criteria for applicants. Part of the criteria for applicants is going to be developed based on some surveys that we'll do with the board. So we will have you fill out some surveys as board members and allow us to understand what you're looking for, the challenges of the district, the things that are going well, and we'll develop a leadership profile that will help guide the search. So that search process the leadership profile will help guide when we are looking at interview questions, when you're looking at matching up candidates, who matches best with that profile that's been developed. And then we also will use that profile when we come back and do a board retreat with the superintendent and the board once they're hired. And usually that's once they start, July or August. And we'll do that with the leadership profile in mind. We want to make sure that this is what you're looking for. Now, how are we going to have this person achieve those things? What does the board want to have done? So that leadership profile is a very important part of the first steps of the process. Of course, you're going to also look at stakeholder feedback, but we'll talk about that in just a minute too. So we're going to talk about the interview schedule, the interview questions, different things like that during the process. And I'm going to talk more in detail about that in a moment. Eventually, you're going to get to the part where you're going to identify who you'd like to interview. So we will bring forward all the applicants for the position, and you will be allowed to look through those. We will share with you in closed session so that we don't damage a reputation what would be the strengths of the candidates and maybe some areas that would be areas of growth for them, and help you to understand who might be good matches as far as the interviews go. But we always take our guidance from the board on how you want us to narrow that list down or tier them, however you'd like to see that happen. So we'll work with you on that. And then we do conduct a comprehensive professional and personal reference check, which again, I'll talk about in a minute. So the board will, on page 5, eventually do our special meeting to narrow down those applicants to interview candidates, and then interview candidates for the position. So I'm going to talk more in depth about all of that, but that's the nuts and bolts of what we're going to do. So it is a process that probably will take 6 weeks, and I have a timeline laid out at the end here, but it is a little bit of a robust process. So let's move to page 6 and talk about engaging stakeholders. So I talked earlier about the leadership profile and how you will also get some feedback from stakeholders. There's a variety of ways that we can do that. We can do some in-person forums for the community. We could meet with community leaders or business leaders. We can also meet with your staff. We invite, if we do that, we usually invite any and all that would like to come to a meeting. And that doesn't mean we always get a lot of people, but still we offer that opportunity for people to come in person, meet with us, listen to how the process works. We're able to answer questions for them, and then they can provide us some feedback. And then we share all of that with the board. So if you have a couple of candidates at the end of the day that you're very interested in and kind of wondering, okay, where do we go from here? We're going to look at the leadership profile. And then we're also going to maybe take into consideration then that stakeholder feedback. What are they looking for? How can we, find a match here amongst all of the feedback that we received? So that's how we would do that. So we can do an electronic survey, which we typically do that no matter what, but those forums will be really important as well. And again, we don't try and pick and choose who's invited to that. We would invite anybody and everybody that would like to participate. So then also on page 6, again, we share that feedback with the board so that you can have that information and read through it prior to selecting interview candidates, and then of course the interview process. Let's look at page 7. Want to talk about recruiting for the position. And the first thing that it's important to know is that even though NASB is the Nebraska School Boards Association, we do have a lot of nationwide connections. So the first thing I'll talk about is in the second paragraph there, we have an application site that's called Revelis, and that is used by 14 other school boards associations. And we are able to post the position on there, so they would all see that. The closest one that uses it is Kansas. We do get a lot of applications from Kansas. But we would also spread that ad out to 40 other states that also are part of the National Affiliation of Superintendent Searchers. So that's in the third paragraph on page 7. It's called the NAS group, and right now I'm actually the national chair of that group. So we get together quarterly, virtually, but we also have an annual conference that'll be in August. And we share a lot of resources. We share our job postings, and that's all free. We also are able to share then background information. So if somebody applies from another state, I'm able to call up one of my colleagues and ask them questions about how they've done in their district. So those are all 40 states that have school boards associations that do searches just like we do. So, and then also we could conduct an even more robust national effort depending upon what type of advertising you'd like to do. It would cost extra, of course, to advertise on some of those more nationwide publications. And of course, timing would be everything. If you're going to pay for a month of advertising, you want to make sure that you're advertising it for a month. So we can talk about all those options too when we look at advertising. Page 8 talks about the applicant screening and vetting process, so the background checks and vetting candidates. So it's essential that you really understand everything about what somebody brings to the position. What are their strengths? What are their areas of growth? That sort of thing. And so the way that we really find that out is by contacting a whole lot of people. And of course, this is a little bit more high profile position. We don't want to rock anybody's boat in their district. We of course want to talk to references that are listed, but as you all know, references that are listed are typically going to be positive, and that they should be because they're listed as references. We contact the applicant and we ask them to also provide us with maybe some board members, other colleagues that have worked with them, administrative assistant, business manager, those sorts of individuals, guidance counselor. And we typically do talk to about 10 to 15 people for every applicant that applies. And it's just important for us to be able to spread that process out and talk to lots of different individuals. And then, as I mentioned before, we'll also use national connections to research the quality of the applicant and talk to people that we know. It's interesting, after doing this for now 15 years, if somebody applies from a district, I typically know exactly who to call to find out exactly what I want to know. And people that will speak with me frankly about somebody. And that doesn't mean that everybody's perfect, of course. You might have an applicant that has something that would be an area of growth, but maybe that's something that you're willing to still consider the applicant for. So we want to just make sure you know that all. We also complete an internet search for each applicant, a check of their certificate with the Department of Education, and then we do a background check through OneSource so that we can validate adult and child abuse, criminal, and credit history. So we'll do all of that. At the bottom of page 8, selecting interview candidates. We talked about this briefly, but once we lead you through the strengths and areas of growth of candidates in closed session, We will use both open and closed session for some of that discussion, but the full list of names will be shared in closed session. We would look for direction from the board on, again, do you want us to rank the applicants? As far as screening application materials, take that all into consideration and maybe come up with a top 4 or 6 or 8. Would you like us to tier them and say, as we look at these applicants, you have a few that are really in what we would consider a top tier? Or do you want us to provide the information and you be able to narrow that down on your own through our discussion? And we'll facilitate that, obviously. So we're going to take our direction from you on how you would like that process to look. Page 9, candidate interview process. And so I'll talk a little bit about the typical interview process through NASB. And I do think it's important for you to know that you have full control over that. We're going to take our feedback from you, but we're also going to tell you this is what other boards have done, and this is something that's worked before. So a typical interview schedule, I would suggest maybe having 2 nights or days, because it would be really hard to interview, let's just say 4 people, and maybe you'll have 5, maybe you'll have 3, it just depends. 4 is a general number. To do 2 one day and 2 the next day will really be important, so that you have that time to think about things. You're not cramming it all into one day, because most likely when you complete the interviews the second night, you're going to deliberate and offer somebody the position. So you're going to want to have, not to have 4 in the same day. But it used to be really common to do 1 every day for 4 days in a row. That's also a lot of time, and I know you all have your own personal schedules, so it's going to be important that we try and balance that. So 2 is pretty typical. And then as far as individuals that might be involved in that process, again, every board does that a little bit differently. You're obviously going to want to have some administrators or district office staff that would be involved, a board time. You could have maybe a district tour, facility tour. Some boards like to have a community tour, although that's not quite as common anymore. You may want to have a small group of certified staff or classified staff that also participates. So we'll help talk through that, determine what groups you want to have involved, and then how do you select those individuals, right? A lot of times boards will lean on the principals in the buildings to help with that. Or some boards, we worked with North Platte last year, they had their Teachers Association members nominate a couple of people. So we'll give you a variety of options on how we can help you to build those teams. As far as our involvement, we have gone to some interview process. We have not gone to some interview processes. So if you would like us to attend when we work the timeline out, we would be more than happy to mark those dates out and be here for the interview process and facilitate that for you. And that just means we will be there to greet the candidates, make sure they get where they need to go, stand by for questions, but we don't participate. We sit in the back of the room or in the hallway, wherever you want us. Page 10, support for the candidate and the board. This is kind of important as we talk about how to support that newly hired superintendent. You could have somebody with experience hired. Maybe you're going to hire somebody that does not have superintendent experience. We are actually just starting out a new relationship with a retired superintendent, Dr. Sutphen, and he is going to be working with new superintendents that might need some help to get onboarded to their position. So once your person is hired, if you would like to pursue that option, there is a small fee that goes with that, but we certainly have visited with him a lot and believe he has got some great tools to help those candidates on board. But no matter what, we would provide the new superintendent with intense, I suppose, communications to help them on board. We have a transition document that we provide them to help them not only on board here, but also how do they leave their current district? Who should they all close the door with there to make sure that it's a good process? So we definitely will help out no matter what for that. And then the contract negotiations, board leadership training, and team session. We can help out with that negotiations process at the request of the board. However, you have a school attorney, so we might suggest you review certain language in the contract. We do have a statewide salary survey that we'll provide for superintendents that you can do some arrays, and we'll help you do some arrays on. But it's gonna be important to lean on your school attorney as well, as far as new contract language, things like that. As far as board training, we will facilitate that board retreat as a follow-up on the search process. And so that's a really great opportunity for you all to meet in a session that's not a board meeting, to talk about goals and just that format. It's really casual and it's facilitated. So you have somebody that's gonna help walk you through those steps. As far as additional information on that and why NESB is the right choice, I'm gonna let Colby talk. I know he's dying to talk over there. I'm gonna let Colby talk for a minute.
Former politician, you give me a microphone here.
I'm gonna cut you off though after so long. No, I'm just kidding.
Again, I'm Colby Kawash, I'm the Associate Executive Government Relations Director, and first of all, thank you for your membership. You know, we're already partners. You've been members of NESB for a long time, and we value your membership, we value that partnership, and what we want to do is just walk with you through this process, and that's what Sherry and the rest of us bring to that. You know, we're all in on boards. This is what we do every day. We work with boards. Every lens that we look at things through, whether it's superintendent process, the board retreats, the things that I do in member relations, it's all through the eyes of the board, because that you are our members, we work for you. We got a great team. We got, you've seen the team that we put behind this, and when the search is done, we're still here, right? When the search is done, we're gonna be here supporting you, walking with you, whether it's through that initial process, the goal planning, that Marcia does, that Sherry talked about, she does the goal planning as well. But we continue to walk with you. We value the relationship. We just want to continue to walk with you through that. So this is what we do. We support boards, and so we're excited to get the opportunity to. This is a new thing for Bennington, right? You haven't had to go through this, right? So Sherry's done this dozens of times a year, right? Walk boards through these things, and so this is not new to us, but we're here to partner with you, so we look forward to that.
And what a great way to start out as new board members, right? Doing the superintendent search. But yeah, we do, I think that does set us apart, is just that board lens that we look through, as well as, you know, our experience. We do work with a lot of boards every year on superintendent searches, so we've seen some of the challenges boards can have and have helped them work through that. You know, we most recently worked with Grand Island and just helping them with an interim search recently, and so we do have a lot of experience that we can bring to the table. At the bottom of page 10 too, just to point out, we do vet our process within the Nebraska Attorney General's office, so we also feel really good about our open meetings law experience and just the knowledge that we bring to the table for that. So page 11 is the reference contact information. Hopefully you've had the opportunity to reach out to. We listed some like-sized districts there, and there's some reference letters at the back as well that also articulate our experience with that size district. And then let's look at page 12 and talk about the breakdown of costs. You can see there the search fee that we have listed, and that describes everything that we're going to do. I mentioned Gallup earlier simply because I'm a big fan of Gallup being a coach. I think it does bring a lot to the table and is able to help you all understand the lens that each one of you is looking through. You know, for example, Colby has some traits in his top 5 that I don't. And so I know that he's going to be better at some things than what I am, but it just helps us to understand, you know, how people think about and process information. So if we were to do something like that alongside this, it's not going to cost you anything extra. You'll get the Gallup coaching codes to be able to do the assessment, and we'll talk about that throughout the process and even after it's done. So we're not going to add anything additional for that. The fee is going to include the board retreat. The advertising options, again, if you do decide you want to do a national ad in, you know, AASA or something, that might add $500 or so, but I don't know that that would be necessary with the other national exposure that we get. The Teach in Nebraska site, people who are interested in Nebraska jobs know where to go. And so I think that would give it a little bit of a national feel, but with a kind of a Midwest focus. And so advertising options with no fee, board retreat, a 2-year guarantee on the search, miscellaneous is all included. The only thing that's not included is the travel expenses for NASB staff, which would be pretty nominal given the fact that we're not coming that far. So that would really be the only thing. I do have travel expenses for interview candidates listed. It used to be a lot more common for boards to reimburse even mileage for interview candidates. It's not something people really ask for anymore. So I don't know that you're gonna have any expenses there. Unless if the interview process starts at like 8 a.m., you might consider springing for a hotel room or something, but I don't see that happening. So the billing process too, at the bottom there, we bill the first 60% of the search fee once we kind of get things going. We do not bill the back 40% until the search gets done. So I'm just going to give you an example. This does not mean this would happen here. I'm just saying, what if you decide you don't really like the candidates and you want to go up for an interim this spring instead? We would do that. We would finish the search in the fall. We wouldn't bill that back 40% until then. So just as an example, the 40% does not get billed with the travel expenses until we are done and you have a negotiated agreement with somebody that you think is going to be fantastic. Okay, timeline, and this is the last thing I'm going to touch on before we can open it up for questions. I just jotted some dates down. I pulled up your school calendar. We try and stay away from dates that have activities because we don't want you to miss activities if you are somebody who has a student in them. So as we look at that timeline, let's say you were to select us, we would get that on our site immediately, and we would probably recommend 4 weekends, which we technically could count this weekend if we wanted to. People know this is open, and I'm sure there are plenty of people excited about it and interested in it already, and I've talked to some too. But we would probably do a board work session, maybe not next week, that would be kind of quick, because we do want you to fill out some board surveys, but we have some time next week if you want to try and do one next week. Otherwise, we would suggest the 31st or the 1st. I know there's some basketball games on the 31st, so February 1st might be a good option. Then we would have a board work session and stakeholder engagement potentially 2 weeks later. And then an application deadline, maybe around a month from now, which would be the 19th of February. And then a special board meeting to be able to select interview candidates, because we do need a little bit of time to screen people once the deadline is done. And then we could look at interviewing right away after that. Now, we're gonna run into state basketball, March 8th and 9th. So we gotta stay away from that, not just because of the board, and this is a really important job to hire a superintendent, but it may affect the candidates that you want to interview as well. So we do want to try and stay away from that if we can, but Monday the 6th and Tuesday the 7th could be potential dates, and then you would have it done by your March board meeting. We could hustle that up just a little bit more, but I think this is a reasonable timeline to be able to get everything done that needs to be done. So that is everything that we wanted to do. Did I miss something, Colby?
We have a guarantee.
I said, yeah, we have a guarantee, it's true. Yeah, we have a 2-year guarantee, yep, as long as you complete the goal planning session with us, because we think that is really important to get you all off on a good foot. Okay, so I'm sure you have a lot of questions. What can we answer for you?
Thank you both. I'll open it up to folks if they have items they want to ask.
I'll start.
Okay.
Just how do you all handle or make sure that the process is handled with integrity with internal candidates?
I'm glad you asked about that. It's not unusual for a district this size that you might have multiple people that are qualified. Whether or not they would all apply, it's hard to say. It's really important that we follow the same process with an internal candidate that we do with everybody else. And in fact, to the point where if there is an internal candidate that gets selected to interview, we even suggest they go on the tour, meet with the superintendent, whatever steps you might have in that interview process, it's important for them to all be able to have the same opportunity to go through that. So we would accept their materials, we would screen them like anybody else, and maybe even more intensely, because we want to make sure that when we bring that information to you, we're sharing with you everything that you already know and some things that you may not know. We have to be a little bit careful because, you know, the board doesn't evaluate other administrators, but we still want to make sure you know if there are some areas of growth that were identified by people. The other thing that we try and make sure to do within internal is that we do ask them not to attend any of the community or engagement, the forum type of things that we would have done with the stakeholders, because we want them to be able to speak freely, and sometimes that could hinder their input. So that is how we would handle it. Yeah. And we don't advocate necessarily for a courtesy interview, but that's something that we could talk about if the need arises. So, yeah.
Pre-screening interviews. So how do you guys do those, or how do you?
Mhm. So we actually start out with each individual that applies for the position. We call them, we do a little bit of a phone, I guess you could call it a phone interview, where we ask them some basic questions. Why are you interested in the Bennington position? Tell us about, your biggest accomplishment. Tell us, are you going to relocate to the district if you're offered the job? Just some different things like that that we then can turn around and share with the board. But it's important for our consultants to be able to speak with them first and make some notes about that interaction. Are they receptive to our phone call? Are they cooperative? Do they get us the information we ask for? Now, as far as later in the game, if you feel that you have 6, 7, 8 great people that you want to try and do a second round of interviews, we could always set up a first round of interviews or do some kind of a video interviews just with the board to be able to narrow it down a little bit to 4 if you want. It would just add a little extra time to your timeline. But yes, we do some pre-interview phone calls where we ask them some questions, and it's usually very insightful.
I have a question related to time. I assume would be one of the few searches that you guys would be doing. Just want to make sure your focus could be on our district.
That's a great question. We have 2 that are finishing up this week, and we have a couple of others as well. So it's kind of actually getting down towards the backside of things, but yes, we would have plenty of time to focus on this.
And then,
Why my calendar was so free when I did that schedule was kind of nice.
how do you approach the recruiting piece? We've heard a lot tonight from other folks about how critical a piece that is to finding a good candidate.
Yeah.
And you want to find somebody that's, maybe satisfied in their current job, but can be persuaded to explore this opportunity. So how would you handle the recruiting process?
Well, I think it's really important, first of all, to note that we do have quite a few individuals that have expressed to us that they would like a size of school, and also location on the east part of the state and this size. So we're going to first wrap back around to those folks and talk to them. But I think it's really important also for you to know that just being in this position for as long as I have been, and all of the different connections that our NASB state has, we're kind of a go-to. So people usually call us and ask about jobs before we even are hired to do them. So I think it's really important to note that as well. We do reach out to current superintendents. We would probably target either administrative district cabinet level members in the metro or in the bigger size district, but also superintendents that would be maybe this would be a little bit of a step up for them. So we will target people. We do try. We don't like to be known for stealing a superintendent and trying to create work for ourselves, so we are a little bit careful about that. But we do want to make sure that we recruit quality people for you.
And my last question is, what piece of advice would you give a board that is just starting this process? Is there something you really wish boards would understand sooner rather than later?
Oh my
This
gosh,
is a share.
there's a lot of things instead of sharing. That's a good one, Colby, I like that. Well, honestly, I think it is though important that you listen to your search team and your facilitator, and I think it's going to be really important with new board members and current board members that you realize you're hiring a search firm to do the job. You need to trust what they're bringing to the table, but also if you want somebody recruited, or if you know of somebody or somebody calls you, you need to lean on the search firm to make sure that they're making that connection and that communication, because you don't want people to think that you are inviting them to interview or inviting them or giving them the job or a promise of something. So it's really important that you do lean on the search firm throughout the different parts of the process and allow them, whoever it is you hire, whether it's us or another search firm, to walk you through that.
I think that's what Sherry brings, right? This is all she does. And her phone is full of the candidates and the superintendents across the state because they have connections with it, right? So this is, we always say there's three main roles of a board, right? And this is one of them. One of the most important roles you'll have, which is to hire a superintendent and then evaluate that person, right? And then behind that is setting your policy and setting your budget. So this is a big lift, and for new board members, it comes a little earlier than maybe you were prepared for, but I don't think anybody's been through this, right, in this board. So lean on us, because we have half a dozen boards a month in this kind of thing. So
And it's really,
lean on us, and we'll do the lifting for you. Your role is the decision, right?
and it's interesting if any of you are coming to the LIC conference, which I don't go to for the LIC stuff, sorry, Colby, but legislative stuff, I go there just to lurk around and talk to people and, recruit people, and that's why I go to a lot of those events, is to talk to people and just collect names and tell people, hey, did you know we got hired to do the Bennington search? What do you think? So it's a good opportunity to connect with people, so.
Thank you.
Yes.
A couple of questions. I know you talked about how maybe some of this gets pushed off, so there's an interim for a little while. How many schools have ever done that? Can you tell me that?
It does happen, as we get into March especially, you want to have the process done by March because that's just an important date. I'm sure you guys have heard that before. But it does happen, and it can be a good thing, honestly, to have somebody who's a retired superintendent come in and do a year and do the search in the fall when you have a little more time. I still think you're going to get great candidates. I know it is starting to get towards more the back end, but a lot of schools in the metro area don't start searches till this time of year because that's just the way that the timing works out. So I still think you're going to get some really great candidates, but should that happen to be the case, there are a lot of districts that do that. I mean, you probably have seen Omaha's going to go ahead and just do an interim, I think, even though they've kind of known for a month or so.
And that's why I just don't want to shove it through. It's something I've never been through. None of us board members obviously have ever done this. And when you brought that up, it just sprung in my head about, I'm very worried about it being shoved through or pushed through. So
We will make sure that we take the time necessary to have it be a good process, be thorough, even if we need to back it up a little bit. But at the end of the day, you don't want to be backed into a corner on, we have to hire somebody, because that's just not the case. We hope that you find a great match, but if you don't, we can work with that. We can help you.
I'd like to think that what you also said was we're a very desirable district.
Yes.
I don't think we have to be in a huge hurry myself, but of many of these that you have possibly done and have done, how many have stayed internal percentage-wise? Do you know roughly?
You mean how many of them
How many internal candidates were hired?
Oh, gosh. It's becoming a little more common because less people are applying for superintendent jobs just because of, all the different things that have happened the last couple of years and the political nature of the superintendent position. It's been stressful. So we're seeing some superintendents move to directors of finance and directors of curriculum, things like that. So there are some more internals getting hired. So it is a little bit more common, but again, if that's the best person for your job, then great. But if there are some other people out there that could be a better match, or have a little more experience or different experience, it's important that you explore that.
Correct. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
You talked a little bit about the national advertising you do. The recent searches you've done, or going back a period of time, how many of them are you seeing that you're filling with a candidate from Nebraska? How many of them are being filled regional and by regional, a neighboring state? And how many of them do you see that you're filling with a candidate nationally?
Yeah. Like I said before, a lot of our searches are, if it's somebody from out of state, it's somebody from Kansas. I mean, a lot of people from Kansas want to come to Nebraska because their financial picture is even worse than what Nebraska's is as far as the school funding and things like that. So that's where we see a lot of our out of state, Nebraska has, a majority of the districts are medium to small sized districts. So when we look at, North Platte, they hired somebody that was from about an hour down the road, and he actually used to be in their school district before he was a superintendent somewhere else. So same thing, Grand Island, they really didn't want to do a national interim necessarily, but a lot of them are filled from Nebraska superintendents. Now, because you are in a part of the state that is closer to Iowa, South Dakota, things like that, we don't usually see a lot of Iowa superintendents come over here because the salary is a little better in Iowa. And so we don't always see a lot of those that come over to Nebraska.
Thank you.
So, anything else?
Anybody else? Thank you for your time. I know we were behind schedule.
It's okay.
Staying late.
I admit I forgot to look at the clock when we got in here, so I don't even know if this was an hour or 10 minutes. We appreciate your time, really do. And like what we said, your membership. So let us know either way, and good luck to you.
Thank you.
Thank you. We're going to be here to support you no matter what.
Thanks.
Yep.
Do we need another break, or are we ready to keep rolling? You guys tell me.
How long are we gonna talk?
Yeah, how long are we gonna negotiate?
You
Well,
want to maybe start the negotiation?
How about we start? If we start getting like it's gonna be a long time, then please just, everybody kind of chime in. If we need to take a break, and take a break for a minute, so.
That works for me.
Okay, well, I think that was productive. I know we ran long, but I think it's an important decision. I want to make sure we got all the questions answered, so I think it was worth our time. The next item is to discuss and consider and potentially take action if we have an agreement or we think we're ready to move forward. I just want to remind everybody some ground rules. I think we're all on the same page. We're going to be constructive in our discussions, and as we talk about folks, we're going to talk about things that they're going to do well. If there's areas for growth, we obviously can talk about that as well. I kind of recommend that we start with kind of review each firm first, kind of go down the line and try to stick with each person's comments on those. And then at the end, we can start, if we can, this candidate is definitely out. We can start limiting people if we think that's where we want to go. But I want to make sure everybody gets a chance for feedback. So.
I noticed we have these papers.
Yes.
How are we using these? Can I ask that?
Yes, so I think that we came up with a matrix, but it was only for taking notes. So we are not scaling anybody, we're not putting a number on anybody. I think we would just like to have an open discussion and make sure everybody has a chance to speak about what we think about the information we received previously, their presentation, and ultimately we did the best we can do. So.
Perfect, thank you.
Somebody want to start?
We don't want to just pick one and, or you want to?
Yeah, let's start with Ed Weiss. Let's go with Ed Weiss. So who wants to comment first on Ed Weiss?
I'm happy to start.
Okay.
One of the things that I really appreciated about Ed Weiss was the front end input from stakeholders and the process that was described to get that front end input.
And I would agree with that as well. I also thought, as far as the fee goes, they're the most cost-effective firm that we've looked at as well. They're at $6,000 max expenses, or their anticipated expenses is only $750. Advertising, I mean, that's pretty much in viewpoint as well. They're pretty much anything that all the other firms are doing, they're doing as well. Background check, I did not, and maybe you guys can, did they say that was included as well? or
They
is
do
that
not.
additional?
Yeah, that's one that I brought up that I was looking for. They don't do a background check. We have to do that.
Which is, I'm guessing, why it's a lower cost, because that takes more time to do all that.
I would imagine a thorough background check would take extensive time if you're calling references and not doing a cursory review. Any other feedback on Ed Weiss? I would think, the one item I noticed is that most of their searches were in Iowa, and nothing against Iowa, but, we are a different community in Nebraska. And so I worry about the ability to recruit and to understand Nebraska.
Or even just as the NSB just said, if
Salary's
get
different,
salary,
right?
come
That's
over
what
to
he wants, right?
Nebraska
Yeah.
and take a pay cut.
Well, Woodbine, I think was where they were really focused on, and I grew up in Missouri Valley, so it's pretty close. You're talking 45 minutes at max, and Woodbine's a really small district, so I mean, it's super small.
Anything else jump out from folks on Edwise that we missed? We can come back to, I just want to make sure initially, okay? The next firm is GR Recruiting, just going in order that was presented this evening.
One thing I noted, in terms of what their services include was not negotiating a contract, which I know we have our lawyer, but that was just something that stood out to me that the other firms seem to include, or at least advise on that negotiation of the contract.
They've done a lot of searches in the metro area for bigger districts. I think some of them is successful, maybe others not so much. But they do have the experience. I did appreciate the emphasis on recruiting, which I had not picked up on to date. I obviously anticipated that everybody was going to do that, but I did think that was a good answer when I asked him kind of what he would like us to know. And the tie to UNO and the fact that they do, they're retired and this is their sole gig, I thought were all positive.
And the fact they have some repeat clients too.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, for many years.
Yeah.
I think of the four that we've looked at, as far as the expense, they're on the higher end, if not the highest, as far as their base fee. But, I mean, I think overall, we were good.
I was a little concerned about the handwritten aspects of the input. I just envisioned a little bit of us with stacks of papers and trying to go through everything. I want the input. I desperately want the input. But I feel like some of the surveys and some of the other things using the electronic form might be more user-friendly.
I agree. It's a good point. I forgot about the paper forms.
I remember you asking that, your face was like, whoa.
How do we plan on getting this out?
I don't know that they explained it great on that part. I don't feel, because I do picture a whole bunch of little cards.
Yeah.
And if that's the way they do it, they have had success, I guess, so.
We're putting that on Tim's desk, by the way.
No. Although I'm more of a paper guy than computers.
And I'm not opposed to having a hybrid, like, that if you're not someone that uses the technology, let's give them a paper form, but I just don't know that I want less handwriting. Can we read everybody's handwriting?
No, you cannot, I promise you.
One other positive, I think, was they had clearly thought about our district, and similar districts placed somebody on the account that had experience in a neighboring district, and brought up the idea of returning to Nebraska, because that may be a pool of folks that we get, somebody that's moved away, but wants to come back, so other positives.
Yeah, I would definitely say that recruiting aspect was probably the most positive or valued point.
Any other concerns or opportunities for improvement folks are concerned about? All right, McPherson and Jacobson?
I think they had the most impressive presentation, but I'm sure everyone's going to want to, how in the world do you have a full-time job as a superintendent and have time to do the searches? And they seem to be successful and do a lot of them.
Is that a worry that somebody's helping them on the backside, that maybe they're not able to do all that? I mean, I don't know, they say they're doing it, but, it is a concern that are they actually doing it? They say they are.
I mean, the other thing they were talking about on the recruiting side is that they would not recruit somebody that they placed. However, that doesn't stop somebody from in their office. So I'm wondering, they probably do have some type of support.
Yeah, and I didn't get that here. I thought they were gonna go down the road of, well, if they come to us, yeah, we'll place, we just won't reach out to them. And they kind of said, oh, no, we'll do this back door.
Somebody else could recruit for a different job. But, yeah, I think they were professional as well. I agree. They're definitely, more excitable and, had more energy, I would say.
Definitely.
I liked, one of the pieces that they talked about was the communication piece. And I think it is important that our educators are informed. And again, I think it's okay that I want everyone to be informed, but I want our teachers to feel like they are knowledgeable about the process if they are asked. So that piece that they described where they gave the educators a little bit of a heads up about what next steps were and where we were in the process and things of that nature, and then rolled it out to the larger community, I think is a very professional way to handle it. It's something that I would appreciate as an educator. So I like that piece a lot.
I did not pick up on their phase 5 goal setting in their prior materials, so I was pleased to say that they're going to continue on, because I do think that's an important piece we should consider.
Would you say
The goal
phase?
setting,
Okay,
phase
okay.
5, like, I guess, beyond the scope of the superintendent search, helping set goals, helping us set goals for the superintendent would be helpful.
The other thing I think, I think they're pre-screening. I like what they were doing on their pre-screening. I like they were the only ones in the presentation material that I found that did the videos, right? So they're doing their pre-screening videos so we can actually see those up front. I thought that was helpful. I know GR Recruiting, I think, mentioned it when they were here, but I like that.
They have a lot of other searches going on, and I appreciate you bringing up the commissioner search, because that was an important question. I think it's not on my list, so.
And they clearly know the community.
Mhm.
They work in it, they know, I love that they have that experience and are local. So I thought that was a big positive because they know the culture. They know the legislative issues, they know the hot topics that they discuss, that kind of thing.
They were definitely excited about recruiting for this because they know that there's a lot of people out there looking for something, for a district this size, so that was nice.
Anybody else have feedback on the first and Jacobson? All right, NASB.
I guess I kind of appreciated that they did discuss that this isn't something that has to be forced. And I do appreciate that. I don't want it to be drug out by all means. I do not want that. But I do appreciate that they said that. I do feel we're in a very comfortable position with our district. I feel there will be people knocking on the door constantly wanting to work here. So that's what I liked about that.
I also like that this is what they do full time, that this, they do a lot of work with boards, it's not just searches, so they understand the full complexity of the process and that they offer that retreat at the end to try to get us started on the right foot. I appreciated that.
I think they had one of the more thorough explanations of the ways to engage the stakeholders, which I think that is a big thing for me, is community involvement, the decision, and I think they laid out exactly what they plan to do for that very well.
Totally agree.
And they were the only ones to come up with really that Gallup poll. I've done the strict finder test before, and it's pretty informative, so that's nice that it's running as well. It allows us to see each other's strengths and rooms for improvement and understand why we do what we do and how we react to things. So, it's helpful.
That'll be helpful with 3 new board members too.
It might be.
Yeah, I think that would be great. And I've been impressed with their training. I've participated in a lot of the training offered by NSB. It's always very professional and informative. They give a lot of real life examples of questions they get on a daily basis. And I think they can help steer us to do this the right way. I didn't feel like with you, Tim, that it was something that was forced, that they were going to go through the process and the process was going to yield a result. We could take that or not, and it was going to be okay for them, which is nice.
As far as my concern, my biggest concern would be with the NASB would be their pre-screening interview process. It seems like to me it's either lacking or it doesn't exist. Right? They're not doing the video interviews. They're not doing any interviews other than just a phone call out. So it's kind of like a small pre-screen, but it's really not to set us up to give us the top candidates. It's really just giving us, like everybody else said, we can give you all the candidates where we can pick. Right, and say this is probably tier 1, tier 2, tier 3. So that concerns me, I would say.
If there was more emphasis on the leadership profile, and what we're looking for, as opposed to
They're not
screening the candidates.
correct,
Yeah.
or they're not going to. Well, even if we do the leadership profile, they're not going to apply that to the candidates per se. Right?
Mhm.
They're just going to give us everybody, unless I missed that.
Clary, do you guys remember, did anyone else do community, other stakeholders on the front end than the one group? Like, does NASB do anything with community stakeholders on the front end, or is that more like at the interview
I
phase?
think it's at the interview phase, is what,
Yeah.
that's the way I took it. Where everybody else was more on the front end to build the profile, I guess. if you
When I
will.
asked the one question of GR, I implied that you could flip the process, that we do have some control for that. And so I would hope that would be,
Do that with.
for most of them, if that was
If
important.
we said, we want that information to develop. I know that, I'm sure, and I think Sherry from NASB was trying to get our process down kind of around that 6-week mark. But I think if we said, hey, let's bump it out 8 weeks, but we want to have some front-end discussions with stakeholders, we probably could.
I would think so.
So, I do think all of them would tailor what we want. I don't feel like if we ask for something, anyone would say no, but.
Anything else with NASB? Do we want to go back to anyone that we've already talked about, or things that people would like to continue to discuss? Do folks feel like they have enough information to make a decision?
I think I've got my top 2.
Okay. Should we go in here, top 2 from folks, and see if we're in agreement on that?
I would agree.
Okay?
Yeah.
Anyone go first?
On my top 2,
Mm-hmm.
I'm gonna go with GR and then NASB.
I'm gonna write it down so I don't forget. Jeremy?
I was gonna go with NASB and McPherson.
Okay. Steve? Give me a minute, I'll give you time.
Yeah, come back.
Okay, Christie?
Gosh, it's hard, because they're good. I feel like NASB is on my top 2 list. I am torn between Edwise and McPherson. And the 2 reasons that I give for that are the time constraint I feel like McPherson's people are under that you mentioned. And I really liked Edwise's front end system. So I'm a little torn on this.
Okay, so NASB is in there, and then Edwise and McPherson are probably tied.
Side, yeah.
Okay.
Right now, in my brain at least, yes.
Well, by gosh, I think Christie and I are on the same page, because when Edwise came out and did their presentation the first, I really appreciated it, and I think they went from being my 3rd candidate prior to this meeting to being in my top 1, maybe even 2. And then I would also agree NASB is in that. So for my top 3, I would say NASB, Edwise, and McPherson as well. I'm not necessarily as concerned with McPherson, since we're gonna be their only client. And I think those two, they seem like pretty good go-getters if they would be able to handle it.
Okay. I'm at NASB in McPherson, primarily with the experience with McPherson and the knowledge at the local level. And I agree with you, they're kind of go-getters, so. Their reputation's on the line if they don't perform, so. Okay, so it looks like I'm seeing a commonality of NASB. Tim, is that your top choice or your second?
Yeah, no, it's tough.
Okay. Jeremy, did you give me yours in order of NASB first?
NASB would be my first, yeah.
Okay. Christy? I don't need to rush. If we need to have more discussion, I'm happy to. I hear NASB is a common theme, so I'm trying to understand, is that everybody's top choice? Or is that like a tie or?
No, I think, again, going back to the pre-screening interviews, I think for me, that kind of took, NASB coming into the meeting was my top pick, and that's kind of dropped for me. Because I just feel like they're gonna hand us all of the candidates, you know, none of the other ones they're gonna give them to us, but they're also going to take our profiles that we're gonna build through the stakeholder engagement, through our engagement, and give us the top candidates versus just handing them all to us and saying good luck. So I think through the NASB, if we do choose to go that way, I feel like it's going to cause a lot more work and energy to get through all of those candidates and try and apply individually our metric that we have to come up with, right? At least that's the way I took it. So I would say McPherson and Edwise would be my two, I guess, and I'll just take NASB out
Okay.
of mine.
And I didn't hear that, so I appreciate your comment, because what I heard was that they would tier them or rank them.
If we asked.
If we asked.
How are they gonna do that if they don't do that normally? You know what I mean? So that's my
Okay.
question.
Makes sense. Christy, coming back to you, do you need more time?
No, I mean, I think our community has spoken in terms of needing input, and I really feel like Advice is the one, they are allowed, they get input at the beginning about what we're looking for. They get input on interview questions and participating in that process of selecting interview questions. I hesitate, I'm like you, I'm with you on the, is it Iowa, and are we not gonna, I mean, so I see those concerns. I liked their process. I really liked the process that they laid out. Now, there's no reason we can't say, okay, do we want to go with a different group that's internal, that's Nebraska, and ask them to follow some of those processes. I mean, we can do that as well. But in terms of, I hear what Steve's saying about NASB, in terms of the concerns.
My concern with Edwise is the references and the districts that they use as references. I don't think they're as much in line with perhaps where we're going and what we're looking for. And so that would be my one hesitation with Edwise. And then the scope of their team is very small, just a handful of folks, and obviously they're retired, but those would be my two concerns. But Tim, is there any thoughts on Edwise versus?
I just I don't choose them. That's all.
And that's a say.
It's okay.
Yeah, I just don't.
Okay.
Yeah, I just don't afford them.
I agree with your references to, they seem to be concentrated in Iowa. The references they give, I don't think are good matches for us as a school district.
So maybe the compromise there to me would just be, let's take some of the pieces of what they offer and their process piece and maybe look to ask whoever we do end up picking, because I get those concerns, I do.
I do think we have more freedom than perhaps we realize in terms of telling them exactly how we want them
This is how we.
Yes, we're gonna lean on them. They've done this way more than we have. I appreciate that. But if there are certain things that are unique about our community and certain things we want to have done, I see no reason why we can't speak up and say, we want you to do X. It's important to us. We're paying you to do this. But they have to be able to do that, right? So are you confident if we give guidance to one of the other
Yeah.
search firms, that they would be able to do that. I guess that would be my concern. I think they would be, but.
And I'm okay with that.
Yeah. I mean, you know, you can always say, I like this person's process more. So being in business, right, if you have an internal process, we can say, like, we really like this process, can you do it? But if you don't do it naturally, it's not gonna be as good, right?
Correct.
You know, so, I mean, so I kind of am hesitant there, but, you know, again, I appreciate the NASB. I've done other trainings as well. I think I really enjoyed their offer to give the board an opportunity for a retreat with the new superintendent to build that relationship. I'm just hesitant on the pre-screening interview process and doing those videos. So I would say, if we're looking at that and everybody likes that, I think McPherson offers both, right? I didn't see that in their initial presentation, but if they're gonna do that type of, I guess if they're gonna do the retreat as well, then to me, that makes more sense.
It said goal planning.
Well, and
It's
I think
like
that's
vision
great, and that's kind
retreat,
of,
yeah,
and that's what I think
same
the retreat's gonna be, more
Yeah.
of a goal planning type thing. But the one thing that I do like about the NASB is, one, we already have partners with them. They do provide a lot of training, they have insights into the board. They do the Gallup surveys, which is, you know, it's helpful if we pay attention to them and we utilize them. If we're not going to do that, then it's really a moot point, right? So, you know, and it takes work, you know, so it's not just do it and go, oh, yeah, look what I am. You know, if we're not gonna work on it as a board, then, you know, there's no work to do it. So I would lean more towards McPherson than Jacobson at this point.
Okay. All right, so let's go back through. So Tim, you have NASB, that's your clear first choice, correct?
Correct.
Jeremy, anything else to add, or is your, any thoughts you want to add? You're still with NASB?
I'm with NASB, but I could go with McPherson if that's what the group feels is best.
Steve, you're with McPherson?
I think so. The fees are the same between the two, so they're really both pretty similar. I think that the gentleman from McPherson just did a better job, maybe on the presentation, the pre-screening interview process, and the setting up, getting everybody to come in and set up that, what we're looking for in a superintendent, I think is better there. I didn't really get that feeling from NASB personally.
I guess I did like how McPherson was, we're not gonna need to advertise nationally, so
Right.
that will be down, whereas NASB did, I said, well, you know, we can advertise nationally also. But as a person, I'd like to focus local and regional, and I think we can get some good candidates there.
So.
Christy, any other feedback?
No, nothing new. I'm wondering if NASD doesn't do the front end because this is what they live, you know, like they just, that's a piece they know inherently.
I heard her say, I contact, if I know this person comes from this district, I know who to call.
Yes.
So I guess I viewed some of that as the informal pre-screen, but maybe I was reading
And
too much
that's
into
kind of
that.
what I think I'm trying to get at, is I think maybe they know more candidates and don't necessarily need that more formalized pre-screening process because they know who to ask. But the energy of McPherson is exciting, but
So then, I guess my question to the board, from what we were hearing, so do we feel that the NASB is going to have the stakeholder engagement to build the, I guess, the criteria or the superintendent that we're looking for, right? Are they going to build that when they go out and start the recruitment? And then will they, in fact, tier that based on our feedback? That's the question. So I guess maybe if we ask the board members that, if they did get that feeling, who did they get that feeling from more, NASB or McPherson and Jacobson?
rereading, sorry, I'm taking a moment to reread NASD engaging stakeholders page, it's page 6. Because I know one of you mentioned that you liked their engagement of stakeholders, so I just wanted to kind of see what it said here. Says engagement could be done electronically through site forums, a combination, staff, district office, community, and parents, strengths, challenges, and attributes. Engage stakeholders in the interview process. Training, oh, they did talk about this, I'm remembering now. Training of the stakeholders to ask those interview questions. So.
They put together the forum and then give them the
Yeah.
interview questions and then they would pick.
Through that process.
Nominate.
So I think it's there. I think maybe her presentation didn't highlight it potentially as much.
It was definitely not the preliminary work that they've outlined, right? So collaborate with the district to figure out human resources, communication, initial meeting in central office, begin marketing, flyer, advertise is the preliminary work, right? Board work session would involve a timeline, salary components, process, and identifying stakeholder committees to utilize for feedback. So it wasn't in the preliminary work, but it was there.
It's there.
And then it identifies their duties, engage stakeholders, committees to elicit feedback, hold forums to allow stakeholders to contribute feedback to the process, distribute electronic survey to stakeholders of the district to elicit feedback, develop leadership profile based on the feedback received. It wasn't clear in the presentation. I agree.
Right.
Yeah, I'm more comfortable with that now that I've reread.
To me, the difference between NASB and McPherson is the additional services that NASB provides, that as in having 3 new board members would be extremely helpful for us to have success. So it's not only finding the right candidate, but ensuring we can all work together, ensuring we understand our strengths. I agree with you, assuming we use those resources but provided. I think there's a huge value in a board retreat. So to me, that is the wild card that, for me personally, sets NASB ahead, but I would not have heard going with McPherson either, so. It's just a different style, right? I mean, it's more of a marketing as opposed to a process and slowly working through it. So it's a style to me.
I agree.
Do we want to continue discussing? Are we ready to make a motion and vote, or we want to deliberate more?
Well, I would just say, I guess to push me over the top as the NASB would be is if the board is going to agree or commit that we'll do the Gallup survey and we'll do the board retreat and make the best of it and try to work together as a board.
I think that's a fair request. I mean, to make sure everybody's on board with that. Because doing it to just do it is probably, you're right, I mean, not going to be helpful.
If they're willing, if everyone's willing to do that, then I think, that makes sense, right? That would be the best for the community and for the district.
And I think they can walk us through a process, potentially even moving forward with our community to build more consensus and trust and transparency and those things that we've been told that people are craving.
Tim, Jeremy, are you guys okay with that?
Good.
Seem like a fair compromise?
Absolutely.
I think NASB was a common theme, so I feel good about that, but I want to make sure Steve's comfortable with that, because I know that people were.
I think,
I
think if, like I said, if we're willing to do that, then I would go with the NASB on that.
Okay. I will entertain a motion. The motion should be directed to the board president and not the administration to enter into a contract to retain NASB, something along those lines. It's a slightly different motion. We traditionally have, the board will be taking this action.
So I'd like to make a motion to the president to retain NASB for the superintendent search.
Is there a second?
Second.
Is there any discussion, any further discussion on this motion?
No.
Jody, you want to call the roll?
Allison?
Yes.
Jeremy?
Yes.
Tim?
Yes.
Christie?
Yes.
Kara's not here. Steve?
Yes.
Motion carries. I don't believe there's any further action before the board this evening, so I will take a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn?
Second?
Second.
Thank you, Steve. Thank you, Jeremy. We'll call this meeting closed at 8:44 p.m.